thank everybody on behalf of Oregon IT for coming, and also thank our sponsors, because we wouldn't be able to be doing this without our sponsors, many of which are actually in the audience. So thank you very much. And we will first start with our connected vehicles presentations and have a little bit of break, midday break. We have some cookies and some drinks and on a table for the break, and then we'll start our next session at 3:15. The presentations will be recorded. Our technical difficulties will be recorded, so it'll be on record. And if there's questions, we're hoping to hold them at the end. But if presenters want to have questions beforehand or after their presentations, they're welcome to tell you that when they get up here. Okay, we have a mic. We have a wireless mic for our presenters, and I think we also have another mic if it gets a little too loud and people can't hear.
I want to sing along with this.
I am not sure I can make that request, but I will ask. I will also figure out the parking situation. I know people have asked me about that, so in between the breaks, I will ask about validation of parking. Are you ready for the next first presenter? Okay, we are ready for our first presenter, Clark County Connected Vehicle Pilot Study. And now you can sing with the music.
Oh.
And I think I have, and this is, this is the one, right? Okay.
So we're going to self-introduce ourselves.
Yes, please.
Because I know her and she knows me. So.
Oh, are you going to introduce her and she's going to introduce you?
Yeah.
Oh.
I want to introduce Jody Carrier. She's the traffic engineer for Clark County. She's the design engineer for Clark County. She's the ITS engineer for Clark County, and a few other hats. But Jody's going to talk about for a bit about an opportunity. So I'm going to leave that part for her.
The opportunity I'd like to talk about and plug is the ITS engineer position. So the presentation we're about to give would normally be given by our ITS engineer if we had one. We've been over a year trying to recruit for an ITS engineer. I've been trying to fill in the best I can for the position. But an ITS engineer at the county would be someone who could help manage our PTZ cameras. We have over 100. We have 100 intersections, and I think almost every one of them now has a PTZ camera. And we have a video wall in our downtown office, and we've never gotten it up and running. So it's there, the TVs are there, and we got it to the point of, well, Mark got it close to the point. I'll let you Mark after. He got it really close to running, but now I go in and hit the button and turn it on, and it's still no joy. So it's the ITS engineer works closely with our IT department and keeps our systems running. We have a lot of servers running our all of the data that's being collected from our traffic stored on that. We're getting ready to implement a data lake where all the systems will come into the data lake, and then that information can be integrated and work for our signal performance measures, dashboards that we're going to be developing. So that's a new project that's underway. We have lots of ITS stuff going on at the county, but no one's who really head the program right now. And as we'll be talking about today, we have a test bed of roadside units, but we're getting ready to deploy another 38 units. So having someone to help manage that whole system would be wonderful. So that's my big plug for applying for the ITS engineer position at the county. We would love to have you come join us. And I'll introduce Mark Rogers, who has been in the position previously of the Department Information Systems Coordinator. So he did a lot of the work of integrating our systems, working with IT closely, getting our completely network, carbon compact network, rugged network system up and running and keeping it maintained. He worked a lot on that. He was a huge asset to that. So introducing Mark Rogers.
And I was also a participant in the connected vehicle project last year that was run by Pro Highway and ITE. So our former Oh,
button pusher.
this over here
Yes, yeah, yeah.
on that one?
Yes.
Okay,
We are official button pusher.
okay. Are you ready?
Well, Mark now is the supervisor of the signal tech, so he's moved out of the downtown engineering office, and he's now moved up into management. But he agreed to come with me today, since we don't have an ITS engineer, and he's done a lot of the in-field work with deploying our connected vehicles, RSU roadside units, so he agreed to come with me and help. So we're gonna kind of pass this back and forth, and talk about what we've done with roadside units in our test bed, what we've learned deploying the units, and where we're at now and where we're going in the future with our project. So we had lots of questions when we first heard that we were going to be deploying a test bed of roadside units. Well, which one are we gonna purchase? Why are we gonna pick that unit in particular? How are we gonna get it licensed? Because at the time, it was just DSRC licensing, and that's the federal FCC license. You have to go through a whole process to get. So how are we gonna get that? And where are you gonna install them at the intersection? So you need just one, what corner should it go on? What view does it need? How many cables does it need? Then inside the unit, there's maps that have to be set up. And who's gonna set up those maps for each location and modify them? We have like phasing changes happen at the intersection. Who's gonna do all that work? When we initially put one up, how come you just plugged it in? How come it didn't talk to the controller? What was wrong? How do you get it to work? How do you even know if it's working? So you put it up and it's glorious. And what's it doing? Is it doing anything? Is it
Lights
working?
blinking.
Lights are on. What do you do if your onboard unit, which is what you would actually be watching in your vehicle? What if it's not showing what you expected? Now, what's going to happen when you have to convert to the 5G CBDX platform, since they took away part of the DSRC band? So we're going to go into an explanation of our experience on this. As I mentioned, we started out with a test bed of 5 units. It was on Covington Road. You might not be familiar with the county, but it's a parallel road to 205 on arterial, moderate traffic volumes. It was a good place for us to just start. I think Rob just picked it. He just picked it. And so that was our first step. I want to say it was back in, I didn't look this up, but I'm going to say 2017 or so. It was back in the days when Richard Gamble was our ITS engineer. So it's been a few years. Since then, we've put in 2. So when a new traffic signal goes in, it's a standard now to put in a roadside unit. So we've got 2 signals built since then that now have units. We have roundabouts under design in the county, and we've decided that's going to be a standard for the county to put a roadside unit at a roundabout as well. Because in addition to pushing out phase timing, SPAT data, you can also push out basic safety messages, and you can have vehicles interacting with pedestrians. So that would apply to a roundabout. So we decided all new roundabouts will be deployed with our roadside units. So we have 3 under construction right now on 99th Street, and we have multiple. I haven't even kept track of how many, but we're up to 8 or more under design in the county. And then we have a project that received federal funding to install 38 new units on existing traffic signals. That's going to be going in next year, 2023. Want to talk about the roadside unit that we use? The Siemens one? Ta-da. It's a beautiful thing. That's what it looks like.
So we use the Siemens RSUs because they're a dual band. So they support both the DSRC and the CB2X, the 5G. When you put them up in the air, you mount them on the pole, you power it up with PoE and 2 Ethernet cables. So you can run it with 1, but we've learned that it's better to run it with 2, because if you lose communications on one channel, you can use the other channel for your backup communications. They also have a provision for Wi-Fi hotspot, which we haven't found a reason to use yet. So we're waiting for that. It has internal storage for its map geometry. So one of the things that the RSU has to know when it's being programmed is where in the world is it? Because all of its spatial reporting is based off of its exact location. Can't tell you that you're 100 feet away if I don't know where you're 100 feet away from. Does it make sense? Okay, so this has got to do spatial adjustments and offsets for every approach based on its one position. So there's a lot of programming that goes into it. And we've learned how to do the programming, but it's so involved that we just pay a consultant and they do it. Hello, hello. Is this hot? Am I on? Oh, okay, so. Okay, oh, I got you. All right. So the, wait a minute, that was my cheat notes. Okay, so in addition to the map geometry, all the programming is done through a web browser interface. So you don't have to have any client software on your machine or do anything exotic like that. You just open an IP session to the RSU and then you can go through the menus and whatnot. The J2735, right now, Clark County is only using SPAT. So we send out signal phasing and timing information to motorists who have an onboard unit in their car. Right now, there's still a lot of design work that needs to be done among the onboard unit manufacturers. So you're going to see a lot of changes over time, and hopefully it's all going to be done in software. But we're making a transition from DSRC to CV2X, and there's just going to have to be some different ways of doing things. So the messages, though, are standard compliant messages. So SPAT is broadcast from the RSU. Cars coming along will pick up the SPAT message and process it into a display that shows what our OBU shows is traffic signal heads with the phase numbers and the color. And if the color is red, it will show you a countdown to the next expected green. It's not a precise thing, but it's giving you hope. Okay. There will be also other messages right now. If you have an OBU in your car, it's sending out messages all the time. It's sending out what's called a basic safety message. And other cars hear your basic safety message and they repeat it to cars around them. And eventually we will listen to those. But for right now, we don't have an infrastructure in the county that's going to support sending or utilizing the information we're getting from OBUs. And we're going to go, and it sounds like the FCC has pretty well paved the way to end DSRC as the platform. We had 75 megahertz bandwidth. They took 35. And so it's going to be real hard to do anything meaningful with what's left. So CV2X, much more bandwidth, and we will be able to send many more messages at the same time. One of the things that we didn't know, and I'm going to guess most people here don't know, is that the roadside unit is an interface to the internet. So as you're driving your car, your personal vehicle, you are burning through security certificates. Those security certificates are self-disposing so that we cannot track you. The government cannot track you because you go a little ways and your car throws that certificate away and grabs another one. And it has an onboard store of about 200 of these certificates, and it can burn through 200 in a day. So how do they get replenished? Well, the big scheme, the big plan is there's these service providers out on the internet called security certificate managers. And we subscribe to one. When your car comes through the intersection and it says, oh, wow, you're down to 10, we better get you a refill. Then it will go through our network, reach to the internet, talk to the security certificate manager, and send back another handful of certificates to get you down the street some more. Okay, so there's this additional service that's being provided here so that the private citizen can remain private. Now, there's other kinds of certificates that the RSU will recognize. One of the certificates is its own, and it says my certificate can only be a week old, so I'm going to have to reach back to the security certificate manager and get my next week's certificate. So it's always got a this week and a next week. We have a, yeah, just hang up on them. I don't know who it is. They'll understand. Oh, thank you. Thank you. They're my favorite people. So there's going to be in the connected vehicle scheme, there will be other types of users that we will have to provide services to. One of those is transit vehicles. So we will be able to give a special OBU to a transit vehicle that will have certificates that say, I am a transit vehicle, I am authorized, you know me, I know you, we're getting along fine. And then it will be able to send a message through that certificate that says, I need a priority, or I'm just a bus. Likewise, emergency vehicles will also have a special certificate, and they will do, I'm just driving, or I need a priority, or a preemption. Okay, now the users that won't get this will be the trains, because they trump everybody anyway. There's also programming that's going on right now for pedestrians and bicyclists, and they're trying to come up with some robust application that will run on a smartphone and help handicapped users, pedestrians, know what the signal's doing and when. So they can even put in a pedestrian call for a phase using their smartphones. So someday this will all come. I'm pretty sure I'll be retired by then. This is my last week, by the way. Okay, so as Jody alluded, the devices that we're running, they have to have two kinds of FCC licenses. One license says that your organization is an authorized user. And then within your organization, each device that is transmitting on FCC frequencies has to be approved by device. So we have to go through an application process as an agency. And so we are a radio station authorization. And some guy named Richard Gamble filled this out, I don't know how many years ago, but he got us in the door. But then we found out that when a chunk of the DSRC frequency was taken away, we had to reapply for what was left. So there's that. Okay, so you get 10 years on this, and then you reapply. You don't lose anything, you just update the information. This is the licensing for the specific channels that we want to use. And there's a few of these that have been taken away down here now. So we can go to here on 180. That's all that's left of the DSR C-band. So we rely heavily on our manufacturer to tell us where to put these RSUs when they're mounted at an intersection. Basically, they have a 150-foot radius that they can listen to and transmit to. And so we try to find a place on a mast arm or a luminaire arm that's going to give us that range to use. We've talked about this to have 2 or more units, but the manufacturer has not taken us to that point yet. Whereas, we down to 5 seconds? 5 minutes. All right. Okay. So this is what the manufacturer sets up for us. This is the map. And in this screenshot here, he's doing the lane descriptions, the stop bar locations, and those are all mapped to phases. And you can see where the left turn is up there. There's purple lines that go there. That's the entry lane and the exit lane for that movement. So the RSU can figure out where the cars are coming from and where they're going to.
It seems like it wouldn't be too complicated to program that, but it's actually takes a lot of muscle memory to get used to doing those. And so we would recommend you have the manufacturer go ahead and come in and do them for you. So if you're designing a project, you want to incorporate that into your specs to say that the manufacturer needs to come and set those maps up for the agency that's going to use it. Especially when we have 38 of them coming, I'm not going to have time to program all 38 and even remember how to do it. So you need to have someone that's doing it over and over. That's my recommendation for that.
It's going to be a couple hours per
Yeah.
site to do that. Once the RSU is set up to do its SPAT message, it needs a controller to provide the SPAT data. And so there's an interface to it that you tell it what controller you're going to talk to and what information you're going to share. And as we were talking about earlier, this little tablet device in our van is showing as we're approaching the signal that the left turn is yellow and the through movement is green. It's a good thing we had a windshield because we needed a way to confirm that.
So we had an onboard unit that worked with DSRC, but now that we have the CB to X antenna on our shoes, we don't have an onboard unit that will communicate with that. So we don't have a way to test to know that that antenna is working. You want to talk about, you tried to order them and they were out of stock. We haven't been able to get one for a year.
Chip shortage.
Shortage.
Come back in 2025.
So we have no way to test our units right now that have been put back up with the new antennas, so we don't know if they're working.
So as we're building out with the systems we've got now, the intent is that every intersection will ultimately have an RSU, and they will all be tied through the county's network back to the internet to provide security certificates. And then we'll be collecting basic safety message data from every vehicle going through. We'll be able to determine if a vehicle is broken down, if there's an incident that needs attention, things like that, that we can not have to rely on waiting for the message to get passed through channels, somebody to dial 911, things like that. This information will be dynamic and it'll be coming into our traffic operations center.
We're looking at having the company that we bought them from come and show us the program that will manage your units for you. So say you have to push new firmware out to all the units, you're gonna want a central management system that will do that. So you're not having to log into. When we only had 5, it was easy. Just go to each one, upgrade them when we needed to. But now that we're expanding our system, we're gonna need a program that we can push it out using. So that's coming next year for us, hopefully in advance of the new 38 units. We're also going to be having a RFP put out for a consultant to do a systems engineering document for us. So we can document what is it we're going to be using these RSUs for. I mean, we've talked about what it can be used for, but we have to have it documented what we are going to use and get IT on board with, okay, are we going to allow things coming in from the field into our traffic network system? That takes a whole set of security issues, brings up a whole bunch of security issues. So we're going to be asking this consultant to help us through the systems engineering process for what are we going to do with our RSUs for a program.
Was that?
That was it, I think.
Yeah, I think that was it. They just kicked us out. Any questions? Anybody want to be a RITS engineer?
What's the pay?
That's an interesting question. So WashDOT doesn't have any yet.
Um,
City doesn't have any yet.
No, but in the ITS architecture, there's a server called the TMDD. And its job is to coordinate the meaning of things from agency to agency. And we just tried to, we had WashDOT had a project and they tried to set one up and it failed miserably. So we're back to square one, but we have a nice chunk of hardware that somebody gets to look at every day. But the problem is that two of the agencies are using the same server software, the same traffic control software. And then there's this other one that's running a different manufacturer's software, and their server is not talking to the other server. I did that great without naming any names. So, no. Yeah, what's that? WashDOT is the project manager on that project. So their server and our server talk because they're the same manufacturer, the same software. That other agency, they're free. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, but you said the vehicle and the interface of the top each other.
Yes.
So I would tell you, how many seconds to go to this whole beat. Is it also tell you like how many seconds to read coming up?
I don't know if we're programmed to do that because the only time you're going to know when red is coming is when you're timing max. If you're timing initial green, it doesn't know that it's going to end after initial green. It just knows that I'm going to do this for some period of time.
Yeah, I think it's too complicated and algorithm to run
Yeah.
for that. And even on the, how much longer you have on the red, it shuts off 2 seconds before. It doesn't want you watching the onboard unit. It wants you paying attention to the road. So it shuts off. It doesn't show you anything. You have 2 seconds before.
Because that could be good for dilemmas of especially. You have 5 seconds before it comes on.
The dilemma zone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the oversized trucks trying to run the line. Yeah.
What is the sorry? What is the DSRC range for the communication?
150, it's supposed to cover an intersection. It's probably realistically picking up at 300, but you don't want it to go to the next city block because then then the units will be talking to each other. And you don't want that.
We definitely saw issues with line of sight to the unit. If a large truck was beside us in a lane, we didn't have direct line of sight to that unit, our onboard unit lost communication. So we definitely need line of sight. So that's why I'm thinking it's gonna need more than one at an intersection. It really works well.
Yeah.
My thought.
Good questions.
So it's a trade-off because, it would be nice if you had one RSU that could talk for like 10 blocks and pick up everything and have all the spatial relationships well-defined within that area. but since you can't, then we shrink it down so that basically you're half a block to this unit, half a block to the next unit. And so so they're not picking up each other's traffic.
Questions for at the end.
Okay. Yeah, okay, we'll pick it out.
We do have a break and brief, so if you have follow-up questions with any of our speakers, that's a great time to ask them. So next up, we have a presentation by Kimberly Horn on East Coast Bus, transit signal priority. So.
Okay, which one is it? Yes, sir. Can you come? Which one is your presentation?
It's already opened.
Oh, okay. I did
This one.
that one. Okay, thank you. Yes, that's right, yes, yes.
Testing, 1, 2. Oh. Sorry.
You can just press this
If it doesn't work, it's fine.
Can you guys in the back hear this okay?
Oh, yeah, I could see that being inconvenient. Yeah, it's fine. We'll pass it back and forth.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Great. So we can both do it. I don't know where to put it.
And they did travel all the way here for this.
Okay, we're gonna do that.
It'll work.
Okay. Hi, I'm Poonam, and this is Luis. We are based out of Atlanta, and we work for Kimberly Horn. We wanted to talk to you today about a project that we did earlier this year. We focused on implementing school bus priority. You may have seen our report, which is how we came to end up presenting at ITE Oregon. Our program was called Connected Vehicle Student Safety Pilot Program. So I wanted to talk about why we think it's important to start implementing school bus priority throughout the nation. If you think about it, school buses are the largest transit fleet in the United States. I recently looked at the statistic, and it said that about 26 million children in the United States use the public school buses to get to and from school. And even with the 26 million children, I think that it's still a somewhat underutilized service because a lot of people, especially in high congestion areas, perceive the school bus to have a lot of delays, which it does. It's stuck in commuter traffic, the same as we all are going to and from work. They've got slow startup times, and again, they're going to and from school during commuter peak hours, and they're stuck behind all the slow moving vehicles. So our project, again, was implementing school bus priority, but we focused in an area just north of Atlanta. So this little oval is where like city of Atlanta proper is. And if you go about 30 miles north of there, there's a really heavily populated suburb that's got really bad congestion issues. And it's a very popular city for young families to be. So lots of kids, lots of congestion. So this project, it was a great joint effort between public and private organizations. We mainly worked with Kimberly Horn, which is a design firm consulting, worked with Applied Information. They're mainly out of Georgia and a little bit in South Africa. They do connected vehicle technology. They have the proprietary technology for OBUs and FM RSUs. And we also worked with the county school system in the city of Alpharetta to implement school bus priority. Like I said, Applied Information is the one that provided the connected vehicle technology, and they helped with the installation and the actual programming of the preemption and priority that went in. And Kimley Horn came in after the analysis periods were done and did a before and after analysis to look at the effectiveness of this implementation. And that's what we're here to talk about. And as you can see, this is just a very, I'm sure you guys all know how, connected vehicles talk, connected vehicle technology, the OBU talks to the RSU and talks to the signal. So for this project, it was a pretty small project given our time constraints. So we had 2 buses. One was an IC bus that was fueled by diesel, and we had one bus that was Bluebird that was fueled by propane. We outfitted both of those buses with OBUs. And then we implemented or we installed field monitoring units, which is just Applied Information's RSU equivalent, onto 62 signalized intersections throughout the city. And so the signals were programmed with preemption so that knowing the bus's route. So say, for example, a bus was going northbound and then it was making the left turn. That northbound left was protected. That northbound left would be the one that would receive the preemption. It was preemption throughout its entire route with its every turn. And the way, because the student population is so big in the city of Alpharetta, they actually have a staggered school schedule. So both of the buses were doing pickup and drop-offs for all 3 types of schools. So we've got an elementary school, a high school, and a middle school. On the left, you can kind of see in the blue icons all of the signalized intersections that we installed FMUs at, and then we've got our 3 schools kind of close together.
The third one's right here.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Cool. Let's trade. I think if I speak in front of the speaker, it might do some feedback. So again, as Poonam said, we performed the before and after analysis of the school bus system. And so these are, again, the periods that we looked at was the month of April of 2022 as the before and May of 2022 as the after. Our main data sources are kind of highlighted here. We utilized automatic vehicle location data logger, which provided a second-by-second geolocated data points for the bus. This again, gave us lat long of where the bus was, but it also gave us a lot of other data points, given like the odometer reading, bus heading, speed, oil temperature, if you needed that at some point. In addition to it, we also utilized the Fulton County school system data logger. This one was a little less granular. So instead of being second by second, it was like approximately 30 second by 30 second. The reason why we kind of had to use both of them was like in certain areas of the city, the second by second geolocation kind of like tended to drift into other areas and it just wasn't as reliable. So we had to kind of switch back and forth here and there. We also utilized the school bus fuel logs that kind of to track the fuel usage through the trips and through the different segments to kind of track what the consumption was going to be. And then likewise, we also utilize school bus driver interviews to get some more qualitative and qualitative data about the perceived benefits once the implementation was done. Some of the metrics that we looked at for this project was, again, we wanted to look at an improvement in travel times for the school buses during their trips, their average speeds, if there's an increase or decrease, the number of unscheduled stops, i.e. stops at an intersection at a red light, fuel consumption, again, done based on the school bus fuel logs. And then we also utilized see if I can read it here really quick. I can't see the name exactly. There's, I think an energy administration metric on how to create an equivalent of pounds of CO2 by type of fuel consumed. And then using that, we were able to kind of calculate emissions and emission savings. Now, these are 2 example routes that we kind of utilized in our system. Like I mentioned, there were 3 different schools in a staggered system. In this case, we were looking at elementary school. So in the AM elementary route, what we have is a path from the bus yard all the way through the different pickup locations and then back to the Manning Oaks Elementary School. And in the PM Elementary route, which is a little bit cut off there, it is a route from the bus yard to the school to pick up all the kids and then do all the drop-offs along the route. And the reason why we decided to kind of split it up into different segments, in this case, there's 3 trips per one of these routes. Other ones were more complicated, contained 4 or 5, was because we only wanted to look at the metrics that we could actually save time on and look at valuable data for. In this case, from the bus yard to the first pickup location, because throughout the actual pickup locations, the bus has to adhere to a given schedule, therefore it cannot go that much faster. And again, it doesn't really make sense to look for unscheduled stops when it is running through a residential area. And then the last trip that we looked at in this route was from the last pickup location back to the school. And then likewise for the other one, we looked at from the bus yard to the school and then from the school to the first pickup location. Again, the segments in which you could actually see any savings. As for some of the legend going on here, we have all the signals that are kind of colored in with the red, yellow, and green are those in which we're outfitted with the connected vehicle technology. Black and white ones are a standard, still a regular signal. And all the points, all those red markers along the route, those are moments in which the bus triggered its park and brake. And that's because when there are kids loading and unloading from the bus, there's a kind of an incentive for the bus, like there's kind of like a rule for the bus drivers that they have to activate the park and brake. So that was a pretty good metric for us to kind of see when there was a scheduled stop and when the kid was being picked up and dropped off. And then for the record, these maps that are drawn out were based on an overlay of, I think, 25 or 28 days worth of data of second by second location data. We're able to kind of track it out like that. Oh, there you go. Let's see if the feedback works.
Okay, so we did bus driver interviews right after we completed our after analysis period. So we got to interview both of our bus drivers. So they had some perceived benefits, some perceived challenges, right? The biggest benefits that they saw that we weren't able to actually quantify were that they were able to leave. So at the beginning of their morning route and the beginning of their afternoon route, they come from the bus yard. The bus yard sits while the children are at school, and they were able to leave the bus yard later and later once they figured out the extra time savings that they had from the school bus priority. So they said they were able to leave up to 5 to 10 minutes later because of all the extra time that they saved. They also said that because it's such a high congestion area, these bus drivers are often so focused on getting the kids to and from school on time, which is typically a struggle for them. And because once they figured out what the preemption, the school bus priority was doing for them, they were able to instead focus on the road, focus on their driving, and focus on the students on board instead of making sure that the kids were able to make it to school on time. And just overall better on-time performance. They said that they were also able to make it to the schools in the afternoon on time. Before that was also an issue, which is regular afternoon traffic. They were able to make it to the schools on time so that they could pick up the kids and drop them off at their homes. And that was another added benefit that we couldn't quantify because the data loggers don't give us that data. They don't tell us what, they don't tell us what extra time is being saved because we only get information when the bus starts and when the bus stops. There were 2 big challenges that I think that could be easily solved if we were able to spend more time programming this priority and preemption into the signals, but they noticed that sometimes the signal priority would be triggered too soon. One of the biggest examples was a stop sign that was closely located to a signalized intersection. They would have to make a full stop at a stop sign, maybe have to wait for the other vehicles to go, and then they were able to continue through the signalized intersection. Oftentimes they would miss their, priority requested green indication by that point. Similarly, when there was a lot of congestion, even if they were getting the preemption, it didn't matter because the vehicles were still moving so slowly or the signal downstream wasn't able to, wasn't in sync in the way that it should be. Hand it back.
And well, these are the actual quantitative results to kind of back up what the drivers were experiencing in the, when driving the routes. So we again noticed, and as a just overall summary, we did notice we found a 13% kind of decrease in travel time for during the route segments that we were looking at. We found an 18% increase in average speeds throughout these routes. And I'll make a quick note on the average speed there. That does not mean that the bus driving at a 20-mile-per-hour zone is driving at 25 miles per hour now. It really just does take into account the fact that the bus was stopped in some places, and you're kind of reducing the amount of times that these buses were spending stopped at a signal. And then finally, the biggest marker was there was a 40% decrease in number of unscheduled stops. And that metric was taken, again, we took all of these stops that the bus did. We kind of subtracted out the ones that were scheduled out for pickups and drop-offs and came up with the final numbers there. And then in terms of fuel and emissions, the two buses, the IC bus experienced a 13% increase in the miles per gallon efficiency, and the Bluebird experienced a 6.7%. And then for emissions, again, it kind of tracks almost 1-to-1 in regards to that. There was a 12% decrease for the IC bus and a 7.4 decrease for the Bluebird bus. And with that, back to you.
So like I mentioned, we had a big time constraint when we were doing this project because the opportunity to install this technology came in the spring, and we wanted to make sure that we had these results and were able to do the analysis periods before the end of the school year. So we have a couple of lessons learned, especially hoping that this will lead to more school bus priority implementations. One thing was the multiple data sources. We had 4. It didn't feel like enough. One of our AVL data logger had some inconsistencies with the geolocation. It might have just been bad satellite connection at the time, or like wherever it was on the road. But we needed a second set of AVL data to make sure that we were able to verify our results. Same with the fuel log data. It was somewhat incomplete because we get fuel logs for every time that someone is pumping gas and what their odometer reading is and how much gas they do pump in. But that doesn't, some of the like fuel is used for route segments that we weren't studying. So that data was a little bit incomplete. Also, because of the time constraint, every intersection got preemption. I think in the future we need to spend more time programming in priority at major intersections, because there are too many other transportation users to be able to holistically say that school buses should get preemption at every intersection. There has to be, a little bit more fine tuning to that. One of the things that we want to look at more is, instead of doing preemption for the entire route, including intersections that are low volume, focus on doing priority at high congestion areas. So maybe 10 signals in a row where you know that there are a lot of vehicles that are trying to pass through, or like choke points within cities. And that way you're spending less time fine tuning the priority, and you're spending less money on your on the technology that you have to install at the signals during this pilot portion.
I think out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're good. Okay, I can. Here's just some other ones. Longer study period, defining unscheduled stops. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Where we applied to some federal grants, including SMART grants, that we want to implement this in other cities. Right now, we're just in the Southeast, but we would love to see this implementation all across the country, which is part of the reason we flew 2,000 miles. So yeah, feel free to ask us any questions.
Our emails. So any questions now or later? Not sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, well, any questions?
Go on, I guess. So all of the results that we're seeing, these are just for the buses, not considering anything for the other vehicles.
Yeah, so that's also one of the things that we wanted to look at for the next grants that we did. We didn't look at surrounding traffic. The focus was on school bus priority. I think the idea was these vehicles are transporting so many more people than the single passenger vehicles. So we wanted to focus on this, and then moving forward, we would look at what the other impacts were to passenger vehicles. Part of our SMART grants are looking at that just through basic, what's the word for it, like signal performance measures. I don't know if you guys have ATSPM here, I use RIDIS often, but those will be our main data metrics that we use to study it.
You use transit priority rather than emergency priority levels, right?
We used, it wasn't emergency vehicle preemption, but it was preemption. Because there's, in max time, there's a couple different priority levels for preemption. And so it wasn't priority 1, I believe it was priority 3 out of 4. Mm-hmm.
Have you done any study to see the impact on all the other traffic?
So we didn't look at that, but one of the things that the bus drivers did say was that other buses that didn't have OBUs and other vehicles that were kind of just traveling the same way at the same time every day did start to kind of just like etch near the buses with the OBUs. And like, I think at some point the bus driver was like, everyone knew that I was the magic school bus, so everyone wanted to follow me. Yeah.
So in next round of applications, are you considering system-wide delay? How does that impact?
I don't know to what level we'll be able to study that, but with the City of Valdosta SMART grant that we put in, we are focusing on just a couple of high congestion corridors. And so it'll be a little bit easier for us to more quickly study what the impact of surrounding traffic will be.
We don't have any time for questions. Thank you guys.
Mhm.
Again, great time to ask questions.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, mine too.
Okay. This is a very cheap microphone, so close to your base right in there. I'm going to try to adjust the volume, but the user manual is not user friendly. Next up, we have Q3. Oh, not here. Yes, sorry. Yeah, okay. We have Q3 connected vehicle deployment. If you project loud, you don't need to use the
All righty, can I just project loud and that we're good with that?
Flip the mic off.
All right. Well, nice to see you all. It's great to be at these ITE events. A lot of friendly faces in the room. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet before, I'm Pat Marnell. I'm Q3's product manager for Urban Solutions. So that means I do a lot of work kind of guiding the feature development for our traffic signal software, both our local traffic signal controllers and our central solutions. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is some of our connected vehicle applications. Specifically, we're going to be looking at applications with the MaxTime CV software. So this is a locally distributed software. It gets installed on the controller out in the field. It works with all the kind of controllers that you're thinking, whether you're using a Caltrans spec or a NEMA spec, or if you've got a new ATC controller, it's compatible with all of those. It's got kind of this web UI that if you're familiar with MaxTime products should seem pretty familiar to you. And like most of our software, we're around open standards because we want to work in a collaborative environment with a lot of different partners. Before we get too deep into some of the applications, I want to do a little bit of background here because CV is new. It's new to me. It's new to all of us. It makes sense to just get the terminology out of the way so that no one's scratching their head thinking about what are we doing here. DSRC, we've heard about it a little bit today. It is that dedicated short range communication. I think people have already mentioned that there was a big piece of spectrum that was set aside for transportation and ITS applications. As an industry, we did a poor job of using that spectrum, and the FCC took a lot of it away from us.
So now we're kind of at this pivot point where we're moving to these V2X or cellular V2X. You see different terms out there, and then that gets broken down even more. You can have vehicle to vehicle interactions or vehicle to pedestrians infrastructure or vehicle to network. And those are kind of an important separation, because vehicle to network means your vehicle is now talking to some computer that lives somewhere else. Vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to vehicle, all of that's happening, you know, really close. And there's different challenges with that in terms of latency and what you can do with the applications. A lot of the safety applications that we're going to see, the latency to going back on a server, even over cellular, it comes into play. So even though there's a lot of neat things that you can do with server-based applications and that vehicle to network, I expect to see a lot of short, you know, communications between the vehicles and the infrastructure, just because there's a lot of applications that are out there. This V2X uses kind of a piece of that spectrum that used to be the DSRC spectrum, and that's just kind of where we are today. When we start talking about how these communications happen, they're all built around SAE J2735 message set. This is coming out of what used to be called the Society of Automotive Engineers. They did some rebranding, they're just SAE now. Honestly, that's kind of like ITE. We used to be the Institute of Traffic Engineers. We're now the Institute of Transportation Engineers. If I was a betting person, I'd say within the next 10 to 15 years, we're just going to be ITE, a community of transportation professionals. But within that message set, you've got a lot of different messages that you've probably heard of. You've heard of SPAT and MAP. Those are what people are really most, whoops, come on here. SPAT and MAP, those are kind of the first things that people think about, because we're talking about traffic signals a lot of times. We want to know what the lights are doing and bringing that application into you know, an in-vehicle app or other application. That's not what I'm going to talk about here today. I want to focus on some neat new applications that are based around some of these message sets. This is work that Q3 recently added to our software, actually for a customer in Hennepin County, Georgia. So we're going to be looking at some applications involving traveler information message, basic safety message, the service request message, and the signal status message. All right, and just a little bit more of that background. We've said a roadside unit, we've said onboard unit, OBU, RSU. At the end of the day, these are the radios that do the talking, whether they're DSRC or whether they're cellular V2X. This is the communications device that links that vehicle to something else. All right, a little bit more on MaxTime CV. So I've already mentioned that it runs on the same processor in the controller, in the cabinet, out in the field, as MaxTime IC. I know ODOT has a deployment of this that they did for the 20 by 20 SPAC challenge. That's out there on Mission Street in Salem. They made a choice to actually use a coprocessor unit in there. So they've got an additional processor that's in there to kind of separate the traffic control and some of these other applications out onto separate hardware. Not strictly required, but is an option that can be employed if that's what you're looking for. What MaxTime CV does is it really acts as a bridge between the regular signal software that a lot of you are familiar with, and then the RSU. So it's able to broadcast those SPAT and MAP messages, as well as a lot of these other messages. And it uses something called the RSU 4.1 protocol. This is an industry standard among those DSRC and V2X radios. It's essentially a header that comes on the communications that's configurable, that lets you work with a variety of different devices. So by following that standard, which the manufacturers do, we allow you to come into the software, configure that correct header, and then you can work with radios from Danlar, Capsch, Lear, Savari, Siemens, TrafficCast. I'm sure there's more out there. Those are just ones that I know that we've worked with in the past, and also probably some of the biggest players on the market. I'm not an expert on the actual radios. That's not my kind of thing. So if you have questions on that, I'll let you talk to someone else. And then what we do with the MaxTime CV software is we handle that communications of taking all that neat signal data from the controller and packaging up into messages for the radios. So with our application, the radios are kind of dumb radios. We just ask the radios to send the message that we're sending to them. Sometimes it's called automatic forward. That's the way we like to do it because we're signal nerds. There are radio manufacturers out there. I think a lot of them have onboard software for other applications. If you're not working with, MaxTime Q-Free products, you may have to configure more of that in the actual radio itself. All right, so here's just a quick diagram of what that looks like, right? This is your roadside cabinet. This one's kind of fat and wide. This is a NEMA cabinet, right? Everyone here is 332, but this is more of a NEMA thing. You got your controller sitting inside there. Both the softwares are sitting there. They're talking to each other. The regular intersection control software, that's doing exactly what you would think it would be doing. It's getting detector calls in, it's putting signal outputs out. Maybe it's talking to a central system. Maybe it's not. This can be an isolated application. Where MaxTime CV comes in is it handles that connection to the CV radio, and then an onboard unit that's on a vehicle or a train, or even something that a pedestrian is holding. There's a lot of different applications out there that people are trying, and the industry is still in this kind of experimentation mode. So we're seeing a lot of great ideas come out of different agencies and universities. It's hard to say that there's any universal solution that's taking over at this point in time. But what I want through with you today are some of the innovative applications that are available in our software today. And just a couple notes here. These are specifically features that are relatively new to our software. So the folks out with the Mission Street deployment, if you get a great idea about what we're doing here, no problem. We are going to need to update the software on those boxes because it's a release that came out in October, almost November, and it's only 6 weeks later here. So this is fresh off the presses. Our first application is one of the ones that people often think about with connected vehicles, and that's preemption and priority. So here we're using the signal request message to initiate that priority within the controller. There's a little configuration here in the MaxTime CV that lets you hook up a preempt or priority call to one of the prioritors that you already have configured in your controller, and then associate it with an approach. That approach is part of that map data that's been programmed into the controller. So the intersection knows where it's at. And then When that vehicle comes up and places that signal or service request message to it, MaxTime CV gets that piece of information through the roadside unit and turns that prioriter on. That SRM, one of the neat things that it's got is it's got the ability to carry what type of vehicle it is. So it can tell you if it is a transit bus or emergency vehicle, EMS type vehicle. It's even some esoteric things like non-motorized other horse-drawn. So if you live in New York City and you really think the hansom cabs need priority during the Christmas season, because this is really important, well, there's a path forward to do something like that. And maybe this, why not? 19th century meets 21st century. We're going to skip the 20th century altogether. There's applications here. That one's a little silly. I don't think we're going to rush out to do it, but these newer standards and message sets provide a lot of flexibility. And at the end of the day, we're here to provide flexible tools that let you accomplish the goals that you have. All right. The next one I've got is a rail blocked intersection. And this is using a neat thing that they've added to the software where the user programmable logic in MaxTime intersection control, the regular MaxTime, knows about the logic that's going on in MaxTime CV, and using some variables, it can be hooked together. So this might be a little small for the people in the back of the room, but we've got some really complicated one-line logic statements here. So what I'm doing here is I'm turning a global variable on when a preempt is turning on, right? My signal knows it's in preempt because the railroads had that set up, and they've had it set up for as long as I've had a signal there, because frankly, the railroads got there first, and you get out of the way of the railroad. They don't get out of your way. That's just how it works. It's very hard to stop a train. I don't know if you're engineers, but there's inertia, momentum, physics going on there. The second line there is now in MaxTime CV. I know it looks a lot like the regular MaxTime. And what I'm doing here is I'm just linking that variable. So that preempt comes in, I turn that variable on. Now in MaxTime, I say if that variable is on, broadcast a TIM message. That's the traveler information message. And there's a different menu within the software where you can come in and program that TIM message. Now that, I understand, looks like unreadable garbage to you, and that's because you're not computers, you're people. That is an actual traveler information message. It's encoded in this format called Uber Hex. That's just part of the standard. So there's a way you can take, something written in normal English and convert it into the format that, the connected vehicle standard works. You paste it in there, you mark it with, a message number, and then away you go. Now you said, when preemption happens, broadcast this message. It's going to broadcast that message, and it's going to be available for whoever is out there listening for it. There's lots of configuration available there. The software will take up to 255 different TIM messages. So if anyone bumps up against that limit, let me know. We'll work to get some more in there, but I think that's going to cover us for a few years at least. I think we've talked about that. This is now an end-to-end solution, going from your controller, getting that, well, actually coming from the rail system, coming through that track circuitry into the bungalow, interconnected into the signals going into preempt. And now when it's in preempt, that roadside unit is broadcasting out that TIM message for any vehicles in the area. More volume?
We're running short on time.
Running short on time. How much time do I have? 1 minute. All right, all right. I got a same kind of shtick I can do with pedestrians, right? You push a pedestrian button, the controller knows that. We broadcast that there's a pedestrian in the area. Construction vehicles. This one's a little different and exciting. Now that construction vehicle, it's got an onboard unit. It's sending out a basic safety message. Software is configured to see that it's got a basic safety message on, brings that into the controller, and then broadcasts out that there's a construction vehicle with its hazards on. All right. What else could you do with a TIM message? I was gonna try to draw questions from you, but the ones that popped to my mind are flash. That'd be a good one to put out with a TIM message. Maybe something with defector volume. There's a ton of applications here. We've kind of built this to be flexible for you. All right, with that, I'm Pat Marnell. Hopefully you know how to get me. If not, grab me, I'll give you a business card. Thanks for talking to you all today. We'll talk. You know how to get me.
Questions a little bit after for Pat, so we could hang on to it, or you can ask right now, he's got a good voice. He can answer for you.
Yeah, well, we're
Yes, right, we have a visual presentation. There is one, two, maybe questions.
Yes.
Do you know any vehicle manufacturers that have OBUs on board yet or something?
the OBUs are more through the radio manufacturers. Are you talking about like OEM, Ford, Honda? I don't. I think we're going to see those first as. Maybe. I'm the wrong guy to ask
So right
about
now we're
radios.
talking Dan Law, Siemens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean,
So you'd have to,
get something else added to your vehicle, essentially.
or add it to a fleet if you're a city or a bus.
The fleets are where it's going to happen first. The
I mean, theoretically, we could
pedestrians.
ship in all of our Opticom crap.
That's kind of the thing. Yeah.
Would love to.
If you already think you're going to need this stuff, don't do this and Opticom because less crap at the intersection to maintain.
So this is a no hardware solution. How do you know
No, this has hardware. This has OBUs and RSUs.
what is the price of this OBU? No,
Yeah.
It's
You need the radio.
whole restaurant.
Is it really up there for 20 minutes?
Tom, we're switching presenters and you're up next.
What?
So, can you unmute yourself and, do an audio test?
I
so we
did
can
too.
see
I had to
the-
write this last night.
Mhm.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Keep talking, 'cause we're adjusting the volume right now.
And I can share my screen once you stop sharing the other screen.
The radios are fine. I can work with their radios.
The radios aren't the issue.
And the real problem is there's just no way to know.
That's what it sounds like.
Oh.
Can you see my screen?
Thanks, Tom. I think yes. I think the audio and the screen both works. I'm gonna give you a clue when you can start.
Okay. I can barely hear you, but yes, I can hear you.
Hey, everybody. First, it's like having a presentation, so people in the back, if you could just like tell me to just volume if needed, give me a thumbs up.
Hello, can you hear me?
So we're ready for your presentation, Tom. You can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tom Haney, and I'm the Vice President of Sales for Kirk's Vision. We're a 2018 startup in artificial intelligence, deep machine learning, and computer vision. And what we're trying to provide is artificial intelligence for every intersection, highway, and private infrastructure project. So I will give a brief overview of the company for those of you that don't know of us, and then get into a couple of projects that we've been involved in that I've been asked to present on today. So at Kirk's Vision, our mission is to make transport infrastructure safe, cost-effective, and intelligent through wide-scale deployment of autonomous AI systems at the edge, using edge processing and computer vision to provide high-accuracy data analytics and so on. We're based out of Houston, Texas. We're a Build America, Buy America certified company, and we build next generation artificial intelligence-based systems to monitor and manage smart infrastructure. Some of the example use cases. So we have a very universal product. We have big data collection analytics, traffic safety and near miss information, detection of traffic violations, both non-ticketing violations, as well as the ability to ticket in certain environments. And then we can actuate controllers for detection through NTCIP and SDLC-based detection capabilities, as well as adaptive platforms, train detection, high water detection, and many other applications and use cases. So how do we perform some of these tasks? Is all through our Smart City AI Vision computer-based system, where we use a NVIDIA-based GPU multi-core processor built into our own enclosure. And we ingest primarily video detection. It can be PTZ, CCTV, analog, IP based camera systems, including many different fisheye cameras as well, and thermal imaging. So we can take in multiple different video-based detector sets and then provide different outputs based on agency needs and requirements. Today, I've been asked to present primarily on two different installations that we have going on at this time. One is with the Texas DOT, and that's a pedestrian connected vehicle application. And then secondarily is one of the projects we have going on in Seattle, and that is a Seattle bus lane encroachment project. So getting into the pedestrian side of things, the reason why we focus so much on pedestrian and bicyclist safety is the significant increase in incidents that are happening at this time. Most of those injuries or fatalities are based around distracted driving, speeding, red light running, and pedestrian or cyclist non-compliance. And so as you see in some of these different images, we're taking video-based systems and able to provide information on vehicles, how fast they're going, triggering speeding notifications, taking snapshots of the incidents that are real time, time of day. So every object set that we take in and every detection that we take in based off of the unique application, we can provide a full auditable solution where somebody from an agency, if they so choose, can go back and look at each individual incident and make sure that it is something that they're interested in and see how that incident happened. So in the upper right-hand corner would be an example of a speeding vehicle going 55.4 miles per hour on a 45. In the bottom left, we have pedestrian non-compliance. So pedestrians just crossing where they want to cross and then showing some near miss imagery as well. And then down on the bottom is an example of a vehicle running a red light. And as you can see in the scenario on that bottom left image of the red light detection, it also shows the vehicle speed. So it shows 2 images of the vehicle, but based off of that vehicle speed, there's no way that going 28 miles per hour at the stop bar, they're going to be able to stop while running that red light. We also use safety analytics and reports in how we actuate on some of the different pedestrian scenarios and connected vehicle applications. So we do provide full scatter reports on objects and what type of object each that we're displaying here. So in this scenario, bicyclists are blue, pedestrians are green, vehicles are red, and our system takes in the full imagery of what we see within the camera-based system, not just the zones of interest or detection on your incoming approaches. We also provide near miss trajectory analytics and reports. So some of this can also be fed into the entire platform when you're starting to look at connected vehicles and how and where our objects coming and going from. So we call this our post-encroachment analytics report. And what we show here is any objects that could potentially collide. So a total time of collision between 0 and 2.5 seconds. And we provide the ability to use a scroll bar to go and look at each of these individual events. So below this image, you see 2 different red icons. And next to that, you'll see it says threshold and trajectory. So as you adjust the threshold, let's say at this intersection, you can sit there and identify total time of collision now at 2.5 seconds or going all the way down between 2 different objects and see how many incidents are happening throughout a day, how critical are they, and how does that actually take place. Secondarily, you can go back to any individual action incident and take a look at it. So in this scenario, our threshold is 1.75 seconds total time to collision, and we're looking at trajectory. So number 118, the event number 118 of the day, and we're looking at a vehicle in black and a bicyclist in blue. So if there are specific post-encroachment events that have happened and you want to go back and look at those and see how they took place, you have that ability. So getting more into the connected vehicle application that TxDOT is using, this is actually a study in Arizona where we came out on top for pedestrian detection and tracking against all the leading manufacturers. And we provide the ability to sit and watch individuals in crosswalks and track them in any direction. We can provide very accurate counts, speed, red extension, and passive ped detection. So in Texas with TxDOT, they're having multiple pedestrians that were crossing through their pedestrian crossings, but they want the ability for our system to detect those pedestrians and then provide an output through the signal controller to the RSU. In that scenario, they're Siemens RSUs, and then provide the safety message out to the vehicles saying that there's pedestrians in the crosswalk ahead. So multiple agencies have been working with us to take that true pedestrian information where the camera-based system is detecting these pedestrians in the crosswalk, whether or not they hit a push button or not, because that's the other main trigger event that was an issue, is that many of the pedestrians weren't hitting the push button. So then they'd just go out and start to cross at any given time. And And again, the agency wants that ability, no matter when a pedestrian goes out there, whether or not they hit the push button or not, they want that basic safety message to be getting out to vehicles, and connected vehicles that are in the, on that approach. The other thing that some agencies are doing, let's say up in New York, is they're on top of transmitting a message to the connected vehicles for the pedestrians in the crosswalk. We're now also flashing advanced signs, because not every vehicle is a connected vehicle at this point. So we're flashing advanced signs, whether it's a message board, a blank out sign, or just a like RFB or a flashing sign system that notifies drivers that pedestrians are in the crosswalk ahead or bicyclists are in the crosswalk ahead. And we can also trigger overhead lighting, because many of these pedestrian and bicyclist events are happening in where there's actual incidents and fatalities happen during dusk or dark hours. So we also can trigger more of, I'll call it an overhead spotlight that lights up the pedestrian crossing, so the vehicles approaching can see the pedestrians as well. So some of the other areas of interest that people have talked to us about within the connected vehicle environment, and that TxDOT has talked to us about, are other areas such as illegal pedestrians. So they want snapshots of these events on top of providing that connected vehicle detection and placement, notifying vehicles that are approaching. They want to know when pedestrians are crossing illegally. So when are pedestrians crossing on don't walk signs? That's that upper left image, illegal pedestrian. So every time a pedestrian crosses on a don't walk, we can take a snapshot of it and provide real-time information on those events. They also wanted information where there's vehicles and pedestrians in the crosswalk at the same time. And so you'll see that in the upper center image is taking snapshots of whenever pedestrians and a vehicle are both in the crosswalk at the same time. And then also different near miss data and analytics. And you'll see that down in those bottom images where we provide a GIF file. You can sit and see and take a look at every single image and make sure that our system's providing an auditable output that you can visually verify these events happening and how they're taking place. So that had to do more with that TxDOT project. Again, overall scope is to try and improve pedestrian safety, whether or not they hit push buttons or not. And so being able to activate those RSUs to OBU communication to alert drivers of pedestrians in the crosswalk ahead. The second project that I will show here a little bit today is our bus lane encroachment project, and that's one of the projects we're working on with the Seattle DOT. So Seattle DOT came to us and said, we have all these existing video detection cameras, because our system again uses any existing camera or new cameras, depending on how the agency wants to, go about taking in this information. And then they wanted high accuracy data and analytics in all weather events to identify how many objects are buses that are going through their bus lanes and how many objects are something other than a bus, and what are they? Are they pedestrians? Are they cars? Are they heavy trucks? What are these other objects? How often is that occurring that one of these other objects might be in a bus lane? And then also the ability down the road to just provide bus priority based off of our high accuracy classification of object types. And so what I have here are just some images of a location within the city of Seattle. And going through the images, again, you're looking at each individual object, and our system has capability to identify each object with highly accurate classification, and then provide information on what lane it's in, what its speed, what the object's speed is, if there's certain information of tailgating information, and all these other pieces of data and analytics, as well as counting those objects. So that upper left photo is a bus obviously approaching us with all of those pieces of information. On the departure lanes, you can see that we have a car its speed is 26 miles per hour. And then its headway time, so its time to collision for tailgating is 2.2 seconds behind that other vehicle. In the other upper right image, we're detecting pedestrians crossing mid-block and providing information that there's pedestrians, out crossing through some of these lanes. And then other pieces of information such as, projecting where those pedestrians are crossing and going is there as well. In the bottom left, we have a heavy truck. So detecting a heavy truck, placing a count for the data and analytics, and then giving all the information based off of speed, headway time, and so on. And so as you see, even in low light conditions, the city has been very pleased with the types of data and analytics that we can provide, our ability to provide something other than just the detection of the object, much more data-rich information, and then also the ability to actuate and or preempt based on their needs. Some of the other graphs and charts and other pieces of information that you see here are also all part of this project and the information that they're looking at. So there's multiple different pieces of information, and we provide many ways that they can look at the information and derive different results or make changes based off of the information that they're receiving. And real quick, those were just the two projects I was asked to highlight a little bit today. And again, my name is Tom Heaney. I'm the Vice President of Sales with Curix Vision. My information is on the screen. And if you have any questions for us outside of what I can answer here today, our partner in your area is Western Systems. And I believe some of their team members may be even in attendance this evening. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions for Tom?
We are short on time, so we're gonna have so long, getting contact info.
If you do have There we go. Yep, no. All right. Okay, so I was saying, it's now better? Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'm gonna try to keep it that with that volume. As I was saying, my name is Imara Galaz. I'm from Wiju, and I'm Senior Business Development Manager for the West region. I'm overseeing 8 states in the West region. So I'm gonna share with you some interesting information about what we are doing and how we get the data from connected vehicles. Is this one? Okay, perfect. So WeJo, the name came from WeJourney. I'm based in California, and I usually get the WeHo, no, it is WeJo from WeJourney. And we are the largest provider in connected vehicle data. We have agreements with 4 OEMs at this point, and we collect the passenger vehicle data. So we have around 13 million vehicles. And this information is provided based on the agreements that we have with them. And they pull this information and it is transferred to us within 1 to 3 seconds. So it's near real time. And the older data that we have is from October 2019. And this data is fully consented, anonymized, and standardized. We work with different partners like Texas Transportation Institute, Purdue University, Texas DOT, Indiana DOT, UC Berkeley, Parsons, and HDR, to name a few. In my role, I work in creating the ecosystems to maximize the use and impact of our data. So as Dr. Jane from UC Berkeley always says, I just need to pull the right information to find the solution for a problem. I love this visual. So this is kind of the main differentiator with our data. Oh no, the video is not working, I think. Okay, well, it is a cool video that is showing actually all the sensors that are embedded already in the vehicles. So the beauty of our data is that we are not adding any devices. They're already there and we're just pulling the data. I'm clicking there, but it's not. Okay, and this data is provided again within 1 to 3 years. So you can see all the sensors that are already there. We are not adding information. And this data again is passenger vehicle data, is anonymized, consented, and standardized as we get it from different OEMs. And based on the differentiators that we have with our data, we have this 4 that you guys see here. So one is the high accuracy. The ping that we get from the vehicle's journey is within 3 meters. The volume that we have currently from the United States is 95% of the roads. And it has high frequency, so we can understand parking usage, for example, and the lane level usage as well. It is historical, so it is great now for a lot of conversations that I'm having related to COVID, previous, during, and hopefully after. And we have the robust data from October 2019. In terms of the product and services that we have, it are based on the and how we deliver the data. So basically the data source is the foundation of everything. So that is the big data. And there we have vehicle movements and driving events.
And then we have the aggregated data, which is the subproduct based on that big data. So in terms of the source data, the first one, as you guys can see here, those are the data attributes for vehicle movements. And this is basically ignition on and off, the origin and destination of vehicles. So you can understand traffic patterns, traffic flows. Information is provided from basically to know where the vehicle is located. So for example, Indiana DOT uses this information, utilizes this information for construction zones. So they want to know how long it takes one vehicle to get from point A to B, how they behave around those areas, and what is the impact in the surrounded area. Another case is with South Florida University. So with them, it's basically on safety and preventive actions. With the hurricane comes through, they want to understand where to get people out of the region that is under danger, and to understand how they are moving. So basically, if they're moving before this happened, or if they're just waiting until last minute. The other use of our data is for sports events. So to understand how the people move and what is the impact in the local traffic. So what is the effect if they are closing a road? And again, it is passenger information, so they can understand the speed and where they are going. I hope this works. So when I've been asked about the granularity and the difference between connected vehicle data and mobile devices. So this is a very good video to understand the granularity. Every single line is one car. So you can see here, for example, this is Los Angeles freeway. You can not only see the speed, but also what is the direction and if they're having U-turns, left and right turns. So it is very transparent, very granular information. In all the packages that we have, our data is based on geography and time. So another exciting information is to understand the fuel type and the body type. Now I'm having a lot of conversations related to charging stations. So with our data, we can show you, for example, where EVs are moving, and cities are making some analysis to make more sense to where install charging a station, or even to compare usages between one and another. So we can tell also the dwell time that they have in certain regions. The other aspect, as I mentioned initially, is the driving events. So one of the most common uses for this type of data is for engineers when they are running a project. So they want to understand the before and after. So they do all the changes, and then they want to see if what was the impact and if they actually resolve the issue that they have. So for example, hard braking and hard acceleration events, they are the most popular on this data. Also the windscreen wiper state change. So if they are moving and if it is raining, for example, if that is causing the braking events, is the rain the problem? Or what other layer could be more assertive in this information? So the other cases that we have, for example, with DOTs are the seatbelt state change. So Connecticut DOT is working in the click or ticket campaign, and they want to understand how often is the seatbelt change as another layer to get to the the data and understand how many people is unbuckle the seatbelt and the speed that they are having. So when they see this significant group of people, they want to start a billboard and see if that change after they get the measurement from the point where they started in taking the heartbreaking events and after they already put the sign. So this is, okay. So this is heartbreaking and heart acceleration events here in Portland. And I'm gonna go fast now with, these are some of the burners that we have, like Moonshadow, Reeker, and others, where they basically, we put our information in the back end. So we are using their dashboard, and it is very easy to integrate, as well as Esri ArcGIS. So our data set could be very easily integrated in the back end. In our end, we have the historic traffic patterns. That is one of them. And the main aspects on this one are basically three: speed and travel metrics, volume metrics, and velocity observation. Now I'm gonna jump super quickly. And you guys can see here, for example, Power BI, ArcGIS, and Tableau could be connected via API with this HTTP. In any other system, actually, that you have. And the other one is real-time traffic intelligence. So this is also available in BI, Power BI, ArcGIS, and Tableau. And the last one is journey intelligence. So for journey intelligence, supports all the origin and destination analysis, volume, metrics, and can be also integrated in GIS tool with a flexible filtering. And that is all. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any other questions, please let me know. I think after. Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay.
So the journey ID, so that's from the ignition on to the ignition off, and it's not broken up into a really long journey.
No,
So
no,
if
it is.
I leave my house at 7, a car, leave my house at 7 in the morning, and then there's my place at work. Maybe I have to do a Chick-fil-A on the way there. But it's anonymous, so it's not actually anonymous. Because you know that I live there. Not that I live there.
Well, actually, for example, with the journey intelligence, we have it is volume, right? So we can only say what is the body type, the fuel, and the year. We cannot say that it's you driving the car, right?
The vehicle that is the one I leaves my house.
Probably. Right. Okay. Because in that case, we will see it in the visuals as volume by zip code. So we can say, for example, if the city wants to know what is the number of traffic that I have at 7 a.m. So let's say you left your house at 7 a.m. and we can show the zip code or the pass-through XY city. What is the volume that we have? But we cannot recognize that it's specifically your car, because again, everything's anonymized in our data. Anonymized.
Yeah. I have other questions, but other people ask questions.
Okay.
Question similar to this is, how are you identifying individual vehicles tracking?
Right. So again, we cannot identify individuals. We can see the volume. So for example, if I show the EVs moving from one point to another, right? And I have an EV. So every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I get a pop-up message in my car saying, if I want to keep sharing my information, I can say no, and I will be out of the list from the OEM, right? So all the agreements that we have with OEMs are people agreeing and sharing information. That is not saying that it's Imara driving the car, that is the car moving from point A to B. So in that sense, if I want to show the journeys of EVs, my car will be one of them.
So but it must be identifying a unique identifier for that vehicle that you're tracking.
Right.
So how are you giving it a unique identifier?
That is the OEM's part. They are given that identification. We don't do anything with that data. So they pull the data and they share that data with us. We don't have a way, because we are not adding any devices to the vehicle either. Yes.
I was hoping you could go back and roll the tape on the Portland heartbreaking.
Okay.
While I ask you, what different decisions are made around construction design? Do you have that one as a case study?
I can share later, yes, with you. Yes. The only thing that I can say about this is that Purdue University did a paper, and they defined that every 147 of car braking events, there is a collision involved. And they do this by taking the layer of our information and collision data. All right. Okay. I think we're good. Thank you.
All right, so we got like a 10 to 15 minute break. Is bathroom here right there. We're gonna to get the line going. Thank you.
If you have a parking ticket and you haven't gotten
I'm
it
going to
validated,
pause the webinar and stop recording. We'll be back in about 15 minutes.
front desk, if you haven't gotten your parking validated, the front
Okay,
desk.
thank you.
Yes. There we go. I think they're both on if you guys have multiple.
I'm just gonna pass it off. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back from the break. Really happy to be here, and I want to appreciate everybody who came out for this. We're proud to be a sponsor of ITE, and we really love these kind of events. My name is Ryan Lowe. I'm the regional sales manager in Oregon for Coral Sales. We teamed up with Light in January to promote this awesome solution. So without further ado, Light is going to present on the next generation of transit signal priority. And here is Dustin.
So we need two mics, it looks like, right?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see if I can do this with one hand. All right, well, it's great to see everybody out here. I'm really excited to talk about what we do at Light. Our mission is pretty simple. We're here to improve communities by reducing traffic, no small order. And the way we do this is with the Lightspeed platform. This is a cloud-based mobility platform that ingests vehicle data from vehicles that are on the road in real time. We have a lot of expertise in machine learning to be able to predict where those vehicles are going. And we notify infrastructure in the communities that we serve with those predictions to get them the green lights they need to get to go faster to their destination. We also, in addition to providing green lights to the vehicles that we care about, we combine all this data to be able to provide actionable insights through our analytics platform. And because we're software only, we can scale very quickly, which is an important point that I'll talk about in a little bit. And it also makes our solution very cost efficient. This is the Light platform in a nutshell. The heart is the Light cloud in the middle. That's where we ingest the data from vehicles that are on the road to feed their existing CAD AVL equipment that's already on their vehicles that the agencies have installed to be able to track their fleets. We take that data into the Light cloud. We do our machine learning magic to be able to predict when they're going to arrive at the next point in their routes after that. And then we send that prediction down to the traffic controller with our Light Maestro device. This is zooming in on our most recent deployments here in Portland. So with the TriMet FX2 routes, we've deployed our system. We get real-time vehicle data from the onboard modem in the FX buses. We get that through the cellular network directly into the Light clouds. We perform the machine learning to be able to generate those ETAs. We package them in a transit signal priority request. We send them down to the traffic cabinet directly through our Lightmeister device. And this device is on the signal network that's at the TMC. So there's no equipment extra that's required at the intersection level. This is all being done over the network, which makes this very, very efficient. Because this particular route spans 3 jurisdictions, PBOT, Gresham, and ODOT, we have 3 of those Maestro devices in each of those traffic partners that will communicate directly with the signals. Also point out here that we use NTCIP 1202 and NTCIP 1211. These are industry standard protocols that we love because we can do a variety of controller vendors, and the vast majority of the major controller vendors out in the market will support these protocols. So it allows us to do TSP in a very uniform way, so we can help our traffic partners leverage what they already have to be able to do TSP very quickly. Now, probably most of you in the room know how this is traditionally done with hardware. If you're looking at some put an emitter on the vehicle, you have a receiver on the signal mast arm, you have to add some extra equipment to the traffic cabinets. All this hardware is very expensive. It takes time to go out and install and maintain because it's exposed to the elements. There's all kinds of performance issues with poor weather. One agency even told us that they have cobwebs on their receiver, receivers that they hardly ever take care of, if at all. And this is very time consuming for the agency. It's very expensive. Okay, sorry, thanks. So with Light's solution, all of that goes away. You don't have to tear up your roads to add a bus lane, which might, make some members of your community not too happy to be able to take away their general lanes of traffic. You don't have to add that equipment to the cabinet that I was talking about. And so you're saving lots of money, you're saving lots of time. The heart of our cloud system is the machine learning system that I was talking about. We're ingesting live vehicle location data, and we're also getting physical attributes from the AVL provider if they do offer it, such as if the door is open, if they're using their flasher. And most importantly, we calculate bus stop dwell time. That's really important to give accurate ETAs, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So really, this is what separates us, in addition to being software-based, from our competitors. I'll just point out, because a lot of people ask me, well, what about GPS? Infra might be moving to some GPS solutions. Those solutions are still sort of on a check-in, check-out system, where once the vehicle enters these bounding boxes, they'll send a fixed ETA down. It doesn't take into account things like queues, varying time spent at bus stops, so it's not an ideal solution. And I'll show you an example here of a bus stop in the VTA system down in San Jose. This is bus stop dwell time at one stop at various points in the day. And you can see it varies quite a bit depending on what time of day it is. And so if you send a fixed ETA down to the controller, you're not going to account for additional time that you might spend at a bus stop. So on the right side, this is the output of our machine learning system. And it's a little bit hard to see probably from far away, but the x-axis is time. And we're seeing the ETA as the bus progresses from intersection to intersection. And so there's a thin blue line that's perfectly straight, that is a source of truth, and that's going to linearly count down to 0 as the bus gets to the intersection. And then the black dots are the output of the machine learning system. So you can see, because the x-axis is not distance, it's time, the machine learning system is able to take in and account for queues, or if it spends a lot of time in a bus stop, and it gets very close to the actual ETA that the bus had as it progressed to the bus stop. And so that second peak of the graph is when the bus goes to the intersection and the process starts all over again to the next intersection to 0. So in addition to calculating very precise ETAs, we do a number of things before we send the ETAs in the form of a TSP request down to the controller. First, when we get an update, we figure out if the bus is on a route that we care about. Are we operating TSP on it? If not, then we can stop the process. If so, then we figure out if the bus is close enough to the intersection up ahead enough to warrant sending TSP requests. Generally, it's about 120 seconds away. Once we determine that it's close enough, this is where the agency business rules come into play. So if your bus is early, for example, some agencies might not want to give TSP to a bus that maybe is going to cause impacts to the rest of the intersection. So That's one of them. And if there's multiple requests coming to an intersection at the same time, for example, if one is on a route with not a lot of passengers, another one is on a maybe more important route with more passengers, there's all kind of variables that we can look at to assign a priority value. Once we assign those priority values and we look at the business rules, we'll calculate that ETA using our machine learning system. We'll make sure and do some sanity checks that the ETA is reasonable. And then we'll go ahead and send that in a TSP request down to the controller through Maestro. So if I had more time, I would do a live demo, but we don't. So I will show a screenshot of this system in action. And so this is our system performing on the FX routes in Portland and in Gresham. And this is a great place to see the combination of all this data. We're getting real-time signal status from the controller. So we get phasing, pedestrian activity, detectors, all that good stuff. And then we get that bus location in real time. And if you click on one of these buses on the routes, you'll see this pop up here. And this shows us the next 3 intersections that this bus is gonna have to go through as it services its routes. And we've calculated ETAs for each one of those intersections. So what's important here is we're not just giving ETAs for the immediate next intersection, we're doing it for the next 2 beyond that, which really helps prep the controller well ahead enough to give that green light on time for that bus. The next place we want to take this is not just real-time activity and showing the system working right now. We want to show powerful analytics for our customers to see how the system is performing over time. So with conventional hardware-based solutions, you're lucky if you know if it's working at all, let alone getting statistics on how this equipment is working, and especially with impacts to transit operations. With our portal, you're able to see things like system-wide green light success over time, average vehicle speed compared to the previous periods that you choose, and things like red light wait time down to the intersection level. So these are powerful tools that both the traffic partners and the transit agency can use to help optimize the system at the infrastructure level. I do want to give a shout out to our preemption solution. So what's cool about the way we do preemption is that we're doing it over the cloud, which is great. So no added hardware at the intersection level, of course. But we also integrate dispatch data into our system. So this means that we can track a vehicle in real time and we know what the people inside the vehicle are doing. So if they're en route to a call, of course, we want to give them preemption. If they're not on a call, if they're on their way back from an incident and they just want to grab a donut and they don't want to wait for a red light, then we're not going to give them preemption. And there's no way the people in the vehicle can game that system to give them green lights that they don't deserve. So for traffic partners, you might be wondering how long it takes to get set up. And we can do this in a matter of weeks if your ducks are all lined up. So we need intersection diagrams. So how is the intersection laid out? NEMA phasing diagrams. We need some information about the signal traffic controller, or the traffic signal controller rather. We need the IP address, we need ports. And then we help prep your IT department to install Maestro. This is a small computer that will go on your traffic signal network, like I mentioned before, at the TMC. And once we help you set up your firewall to get access to our Light Cloud from the Maestro device, when we ship this device to you, it's very easy to install. You're literally just plugging in a few Ethernet cables, you're plugging in the power, and it turns on. All of our software updates are done over the air. It's zero maintenance after that. And then finally, you'll set up your TSP channels and your prioriters, and that's something that we empower the agency to do intersection by intersection to make sure that when we send you TSP requests that you're going to service them the way that you want to. And then on the transit side, we heavily rely on GTFS feeds. So this tells us in great detail how the routes are laid out, where the stops are located, and that provides everything we need to know from the operations side of where this bus is going to go, where it's going to stop. And then we need a high quality CAD AVL feed, so sub 5 seconds or less updates to be able to do what we do in real time. And then we'll work with you to set up business rules to decide when we want to give and who to give TSP to. So I want to briefly go over some early results we've seen on the FX route in TriMet. We launched less than 3 months ago, mid-September. And this is average red light wait time over time. And so the first dotted blue line is when we first launched. And so we had red light wait time for the pre-existing Route 2 before that. We the route launch, we launched our system. And then for about 4 days, we realized we had some capacity issues because on route launches, when we had the first, all the buses actually at the same time, we ran TSP on. We had to fix some issues related to a lot of vehicles being turned on at the same time. So it was a 4-day period where our system was off. So you see that the red light wait time goes back up. We fixed that, and that's what the green line is. And then we saw a massive reduction in red light wait time, about 75%. And this translates to about 6 minutes in one direction, which is fantastic. I'll skip this because this is kind of showing the previous slide in a different way. And in terms of on-time performance, we're seeing now that the on-time performance is 90%, sometimes a little bit more. And a key thing that I want to point out is recently TriMet had to take their new Nova buses, the high capacity buses, out of service. And because our system is cloud-based, they're able to use their old fleets. And because we recognize the bus via their CAD AVL system, we're able to seamlessly switch over to that old fleet. So if they had gone with a hardware-based solution, we might not be doing TSP right now because that equipment may or may not have been there. So it doesn't matter the equipment's type that you used, our system is able to see that and then continue TSP as normal. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to AJ to talk about some things in TriMet related to our operations.
Hi, I'm AJ O'Connor, the Director of ITS for TriMet. And I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the operational impacts that we did not account for originally in the project. And first of all, a shout out to Federal Highways Administration and ODOT, which is partially grant funding this. And one of the big changes was we added bus only signals and some queue jump lanes. And this signal here you see is very similar if anybody's familiar with light rail or trains. That's a very similar process, and we have it at those locations there. And one of the issues that we encountered and didn't really think about was similar to what the presentation before on school buses said. What happens when a bus pulls over and it's not a scheduled stop, which is what we encountered, and they stop for a security reason or the operator's sick? And what we encountered was the bus continued to send the ETA, continued to send the TSP request. So we worked, because we had a software solution, Light was very quickly able to change that and essentially shut off the TSP probe from that bus if it sat at a location for too long. So we knew it wasn't going to move. So it just stopped it so that the traffic signal could function normally. And then when the operator, we integrated it with, since we're integrating and sending data from our CAD system, when they activated the left turn signal, the TSP probe data would re-energize and go back to Light and start the TSP again. So that was a huge thing that we're working on. The other thing that I would say about this project is it's forced Portland Bureau of Transportation, TriMet, and our other regional traffic partners to work together on a daily basis in a way that we never have before. We also encountered construction in some of these bus-only lanes that we weren't aware of. And the impact, if the bus is not in that bus-only lane and gets into the regular lane of traffic, can really create havoc with how that traffic intersection is programmed. Did I cover everything? I think I did. And I guess I can talk about the next future work. We are looking at 2 major corridors, 82nd and TV Highway, for sort of the FX treatment that you see on Division. We are going to integrate based on those operational issues that I was describing before. It's kind of obvious now, it wasn't to us initially, that we want to send some of this data that Light is capturing on status of signals. And if we do emergency vehicle preemption in this city, it would be great for our dispatch to be able to see where fire trucks are going, to be able to see the status of a light, see the status of that traffic only signal, so that they're able to intervene if they need to sooner. one of the things that we're going to be doing very soon and touches very much on what Pat Martell was talking about earlier, PBOT, we have one major intersection on the FX route where heavy rail and light rail go through it. And the heavy rail, as Pat said, they rule the world and they don't care who you are. So they can send a train and park it there for like 2 hours and block that intersection. And so you can imagine if you got a full bus load and you're going there and suddenly the gate arm drops and you're stuck. So the way TriMet deals with that now is the first bus calls into dispatch, says we're stuck, and then all the other buses get a reroute notification. What we are hoping to do is, since we can detect, well, not we, PBOT can detect when that heavy rail is coming through, pass that on to light, and if we integrate that back into our CAD, then hopefully we can send out detour messages to all the buses on that route before we get that first bus stuck. And light rail integration. Because it's software-based, we're in the process of installing essentially a computer on every light rail vehicle, and we're hoping to pilot TSP with light rail in the future as well. And the next presentation you're going to hear from is Mark Haynes from PBOT, and the part that Dustin was talking about, light is doing all the requesting of TSP. TriMet had the existing infrastructure on the bus to make that possible, but the entire TSP system would not be possible if PBOT, we're only making the request and PBOT has to do something with that request. And Mark is going to entertain everyone with all the massive amount of work that he did to make FX such a success. And I just want to thank Dustin at Light and PBOT and Bikram and Allison, if she's here as well, for the success of FX, because it wouldn't have happened with a close partnership.
Questions as we were loading up Mark's presentation.
Feel free to ask questions. Go with actual physical extra device, or do they go with virtual server?
Physical.
You're physical?
Yep.
How did testing go?
The testing of what? There was lots of testing.
Up to the extra device itself. I mean, that's going to be a first county. That'll be a first thing that.
Well, I think you can ask Mark that, but from TriMet's perspective, it went well. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I would say it was just educating them about the firewall setup and the architecture of the device to make sure that their security requirements were met. There wasn't any actual testing per se. It was just the education piece.
PBOT had to install additional firewall to make sure product not one traffic. So there's additional firewall.
I have a question on cloud-based preemption. I mean, you just mentioned like ETAs, calculated by machine learning. What kind of, whose model? Does this a neural network, or which kind of machine learning model is used for the prediction?
I can't really give too many details about that. I know it's a supervised learning problem. It's, basically a regression of, we have this target ETA. We have a bunch of parameters to be able to predict that ETA and the exact model. Maybe we can talk offline about that to go into the details of that.
So
Yeah.
one kind of clarification, I think, for me is that, so does this line up with connected vehicles, or like, what's the compare and contrast between this versus other potential using the connected vehicle infrastructure, whether the DSRC radio or
Yeah, so I guess in our opinion for TSP and EVP, it's not really necessary because we're getting that high quality feed from the vehicles. We can figure out where they're going and then send that request down to the control without having to set up any equipment. So we're looking at the cost savings from not having to deal with V2X right now.
TriMet did, at the very beginning of the project, look at DSRC. We kind of surveyed the landscape when we were writing our request for proposal for the TSP system, and we purposely chose not to do DSRC. We didn't want to add another radio to the vehicle, and we felt that we have what wasn't really mentioned is we have a computer on every bus, we have a mobile access router, and we have a Verizon private network that is sending it. And so the vehicle to network is the model of we're borrowing. Thank you for Pat for showing us all the acronyms, but we're doing vehicle to network. And there was a lot of concern about latency initially, and that proved not to be true. We were already using that same bus network. If anybody's in Portland and you use your Hop Fast Pass card, you tap on a validator, that's going in validating that halfway around the world in milliseconds. So we did not comment based on our eFare implementation that we were not going to have an issue with vehicle to network, and we haven't so far.
Is there any part of the arrival algorithm that you have to scale back, or a future thing you would add if you have more data?
Yes, actually, because they changed the route stops for this as soon as we launched the system. So we didn't get that training period. So one thing I forgot to mention on the transit side for setup is we have to collect 2 months of that CAD-AVL data to be able to learn those patterns. So what we had to do is build models based on the old route 2 and just hope that they worked for the first month or so until we collected the data from the actual route. And they were good enough. I would say they definitely got better over time. But typically for a new route, we like to collect that data before we launch and build those models well.
Follow up to that. So on the slide that you showed where it looked like a slight kind of gradual improvement. So is that it's still learning it with the new data?
Yes, so we use about 60 to 90 days, like a sliding window of operation. And so if there's any new phenomenon that comes up in traffic where there's a queue that builds up at the same time in the same place, then it's slowly going to learn that over time and incorporate that into the models.
Thanks.
Well, I'm sure I am. I was trying to say.
How do I put the notes on it?
How do I get the notes on?
Does anybody have any good Christmas jokes? No? Trying to. It's kind of hard to figure out where the mouse went. It's somewhere. There it is. I know a bad Christmas joke. What did Mrs. Claus say to Santa Claus about the weather? I'm trying to move it so I can. It's raining, dear. I said it was terrible. I don't disappoint.
I think that works. That should work, yeah.
Okay.
Is it this one?
Both work.
Oh, either one. Okay.
I just paused it.
Find the mouse.
Finding the mouse.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you for your patience. Hi, I'm Mark Haynes. I work for the City of Portland. I'm in the ITS group. And I want to talk about kind of the public agency view, what we did for the Division Transit Project. I was the lead engineer for the technology portion, so that means project managing, construction managing, doing all the signal timing and operations, and then of course the next gen TSP. So we have about 5 or 6 years of work and about 20 minutes of presentation. So bear with me, we'll get through this together, I hope. So the Division Transit Project, what was it? We did, as part of the DTP, we touched 35 signals in PBOT. 6 of those were brand new, 11 were fully rebuilt traffic signals in place, 10 were modified, and 9 were controller only, so controller and timing. ODOT and Gresham also had some signals in there, 2 and 11 respectively. The goal of the project was to reduce travel time for the transit vehicles by up to 20% over the existing route. At the same time, the city of Portland also had, oh man, you can't see it. There we go. Okay, at the same time, the city of Portland also had a project that was overlapping called the Outer Division Multimodal Safety Project. I was also the lead engineer on that. And it went from 80th Avenue to the city limits at 174th. That was another 9 new traffic signals and 1 more modified traffic signal. So PBOT had 45 total traffic signals that we touched as part of these 2 projects. Now, with a lot of that construction activity as part of the projects, it meant that we had the opportunity to fully reimagine the corridor in terms of signal timing and operations in order to achieve the goals that are important to PBOT and to TriMet. It'll be a little awkward here, but bear with me. There we go. So now I just briefly want to talk about the fiber. This is kind of the unsung hero of the project. We, as part of this project, laid 432 strands of ribbon type fiber. Now that's a little bit different than your traditional fiber type. In about the same footprint, you can fit a lot more fiber strands than you could in a traditional 96. And I wanted to show this as an example. So at the top, you see a 96 strand fiber. At the bottom, you see 432 ribbon style. It's about the same sheathing. This was a huge win for the corridor because it meant that we could remotely manage our signal system. We could gather a lot more data from the signals to see how it's working and be much more responsive to our communities. I also wanted to share this picture. I took this picture at OMSI. This is 3,000 pair or 6,000 copper wire and a 24 strand fiber. And still the 24 strand fiber has more than 300 times the capacity. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Let's talk about the signal operation goals. Kind of cutting off here, but signal timing and operations can be powerful because it deals so much in time, and that affects everyone differently. To center ourselves at PBOT, we tried to perform all of our work on this project looking through the lenses of safety, equity, and the PBOT modal hierarchy. You can see that Division is considered a high crash corridor. Here it is circled. It's one of the top 30 high crash streets, specifically for people walking and rolling. And it also has 5 high crash intersections. This is a snippet from the PBOT equity matrix, and it shows that Division runs through 11 zones where the equity matrix scores those areas at a level 10, which is the highest level. That means that we want to focus our investments in those areas. And we also tried to follow the PBOT modal hierarchy. So at the top, you have pedestrians, bicycles, and public transit, and towards the bottom, freight, taxis, and private autos. So now I'm going to talk just briefly about what we did, how we approached the signal timing and operations at many of the traffic signals along Division. We used a specific set of coordination parameters in order to provide the best service to Division without diminishing the service for other movements. Furthermore, we addressed pedestrian safety through non-traditional phasing, pedestrian head starts or LPIs, and by removing the assumption that we would use a flashing yellow arrow operation. So we made some changes in the coordination parameters to make things run as specifically as possible. That means that we kind of ignored the global settings and put everything on each phase operation for each pattern. We used a coord mode called actuated coordinated. which is right here. And that generally lets the signal run as flexibly as possible outside of the chord phase. We also made the transition percentages a little bit more aggressive back here in order to get the signal back into coordination anytime it went into transition. We set the force offs to look at each phase in the pattern instead of at the pattern level. And then for the force offs in each phase, we set the force offs for the coordinated phases as fixed, and then all the other phases as floating. And what that does is it brings all the extra green time for that cycle back to the coordinated phase. So in this way, we're really trying to prioritize the green time on the main line. Another thing we did to try to improve the left turn operation was we used something called a ring plan and early chord gap out. So what that does is it looks for oncoming traffic, a gap in oncoming traffic, and allows that left turn to be served more than once per cycle. We tried to use an internal feature called conditional service, but that ended up putting a lot of our signals into flash late at night. The electricians loved it. Okay. Let's see. Oh my gosh, I'm too far. Okay, so I'd like to go over a few examples of how we use non-traditional phasing to meet the goals of the project. This is an intersection you might see in a lot of our the west segment traffic signals. This is an example of the phase diagram. And at first glance, you might see it looks like a generic 8-phase intersection. In the west segment, we generally have shorter left turn queue space, which may result in queue spillback, blocking the bus. So I made the left turns into overlaps that activate a lagging left turn whenever the bus priority is called. Otherwise, it doesn't serve the lagging left, so we're only prioritizing vehicles when they hinder the bus movement. This is an example of a phase diagram and rotation that we used east of I-205. You can see that the west leg crossing and the southbound right turn only do not go together. And that's because I didn't want the green for those two movements to come up when there was a conflict. So the west leg and east leg crossings can serve together, and the east leg and the southbound right turn can serve together as well. Another thing we did here to benefit left turning movements is we made the eastbound left turn an overlap that allows it to serve with the east leg crossing. So as soon as that, if that east leg crossing comes up, you'll see the eastbound left turn also come up. As soon as there's demand on that southbound right turn only lane, the eastbound left turn terminates and the southbound right turn fulfills its demand until it terminates. Now you might say, well, why didn't we just run the left turn and the right turn at the same time? That shouldn't be a conflict. But all along this corridor, we have a lot of traffic separators. And so each of the traffic signals out here, a lot of the mainline left turns are actually also U-turn locations. So that would be a conflict. Finally, we get to a bus signal location. This is 119th looking eastbound. It's an old photo, so the bus signal is bagged. We discussed this subject considerably during design and found that a bus-specific signal made the most sense to use along this corridor. There are 7 locations with bus signals, 3 of which have eastbound and westbound direction bus signals. The vertical bar represents the green indication. The horizontal bar represents the red. You can kind of see it. And the center indication is actually a flashing triangle that activates during the yellow interval. At this location, we ended up using, for the eastbound through movement, it was actually made more sense to make it an overlap. So it's an overlap with the eastbound ped and bike, phase 2, and also the eastbound right turn only, phase 9. The eastbound right turn only is also used as an overlap with phase 9 and phase 8, as well as with the northbound through vehicle movements, as well as the east leg crossing. Furthermore, this is an example where we couldn't fully separate the pedestrian movements from the vehicle movements. So we added a pedestrian head start, or LPI, to the side street movements. The bus signal runs as is run by overlap 5, and it's called using the ETA from light as an input, nothing else. You'll see more about that later, but we decided that was the clearest way for the signal to know that a bus needed service and not another vehicle. So this was all a warm-up. Are you ready? We have 3 protected intersections at the along Division. Let me give you maybe a simpler view here. Maybe. So at these intersections, we have protected features. They help improve the visibility for conflicting movements around the cyclists and drivers. All 4 approaches have protected left turns, through movements, protected right turns, bike and pedestrian phases, plus the exclusive eastbound and westbound bus phases. The exclusive bus phases involve the bus approaching the intersection in the right turn lane and serving the station on the near side of the intersection. You can notice the bat lane does not continue through the far side of the intersection, so the bus needs an exclusive phase to move from the right turn lane to the far side through lane. Bear with me, I made a terrible PowerPoint animation here. So there it goes, moving through the intersection with ease. Now, this didn't happen overnight. We thought long and hard about this. We had several whiteboard sessions at the PBOT offices pre-pandemic. We started off by removing all the numbers from the movements and just focusing on which movements can run concurrently. So we removed all the numbers and we drew out on a large whiteboard what we thought was possible. This was all before we knew which TSP vendor we were going to use. So one of our goals was to provide the bus a maximum number of opportunities to be served at these intersections in each cycle. Through this exercise, we were able to identify 3 opportunities in each cycle when the bus could be served with other concurrent phases. This ensured that the cycle was as productive as possible, even during the TSP routines. So this is what we ended up with. At the top, you see the phase diagram, and in every circle, you see a number, and those circles represent overlaps. So each movement at this intersection is run using an overlap. All movements except the bikes and peds, in fact, are run using overlaps. Towards the bottom here, you can see the phase rotation, and you can see in green, there are 3 opportunities for the bus to be served, and in blue are the ped and bike movements. Oops. To read this, you can also see that during phases 1 and 5, the movements that are being described here are still the left turn phases, but they're shown as the overlaps, which are the movements. So if you look at phase 1, that can happen during overlap 12 and 6. If you come down here, overlap 6 has phase 1, and overlap 12 also has phase 1. Because there's so many phases at this intersection, it's running free, as you can imagine. And it came out to 20 phases running over 22 channels. So we couldn't use our existing standard signal cabinets because they max out at 18 channels. Therefore, during design, we decided to use something called a serial cabinet, which can operate up to 32 channels. So I'll show you an example of that here. On the left, you see the 332 cabinet with the load switches at the bottom and a conflict monitor. Each load switch runs 1 channel in a 332 cabinet. On the right, we went with a double wide serial cabinet to give more room for peripherals and a little bit more elbow room to our electricians. The difference here, the major difference here is that each output card can run 2 channels. And instead of a conflict monitor, we have something called an MMU. And that's programmed using a data key. We decided to do a double wide cabinet to get more space, but you could do this all in a single cabinet as well. And here's just a view of the back of it. It did take some additional training for our electricians, but in general, it looks pretty close to the same. All right. So now I want to talk about the next gen transit signal priority and something we developed, some pedestrian priority along this corridor as well. With the next gen TSP, Light is able to send our controller a check-in, ETA, and a checkout, as well as updates every second. These come from much further away now. They're updated each second, and they are constantly improved as the machine learning model matures. So we decided to use the ETA sent by Light as our main input for the TSP routines. sort of dynamic detector, if you will, that gets better over time. Now, why do we use bus priority? The Oregon Administrative Rule defines what a transit vehicle is, what an emergency vehicle is, and how those two can operate in our traffic system. The big difference between preemption and bus priority is that bus priority can modify the green intervals, but cannot change the display sequence. So that sort of set up how we approached our problems here. With the next-gen TSP, we are able to get as close to preemption as possible. So you're familiar with this diagram, I'm sure. This looks a lot like what we have today. So the existing bus kind of emits this IR, kind of blasts the signal with the IR transmitter, and the signal accepts that and tries to react as quickly as it can to that bus call. All of that data is sent to PBOT, and we can see things like, did it happen or not? Meanwhile, the bus is already sending all this information through the Verizon networks cell network over to TriMet, and they're able to use that information to do things like scheduling. The key here is that we were missing a connection between TriMet and PBOT, and that's where Light comes in. So they were the bridge between these two data centers, providing analytics and a better way to move the bus. So PBOT did a lot of work using the internal features. This is a screen from the controller software that shows how to configure prioritors. As we performed that testing, we found that using the internal features did not meet the needs of PBOT and were pretty unpredictable. Also, the calculations used in the priority routine use these transition parameters that we already use for a different purpose. Furthermore, we found that the signal would often hold the priority phase too early and for too long, only to time out just before the bus arrived. All the while, the controller was delaying service to other phases that could have served in time. And since I believe that TSP is only good if it actually serves the people who want to ride the bus, I wanted to make sure that the people using the bus had the best opportunity to get to their station before the bus had a priority green. So we developed our own TSP programming using the user programs of the Intellect controllers. 5 minutes, okay. Oh my gosh. Here's what some of the user programs look like. This is a PED priority routine. I'll just show you the flow chart instead. Basically, what we're trying to do here is have the signal act almost as if it's running free. So if the main line has received its full green time, we actually set the controller free and force off all the other phases in order to get to that PED crossing as soon as possible. Again, this is to help serve our communities more precisely. This also ties into the TSP routine that I'll also show here, maybe. So here's the user program flowchart for the TSP routine. The Light system does not request priority until the bus is at least 120 seconds away and the signal is one of the next 3 being requested. Using the ETA as the input to decide when to start the routine, I developed what I call a primary interval and a secondary interval. The primary interval is the latest I can force off the priority phase to serve the side street pedestrian and still get back to the priority phase in time for the bus arrival. That way people can actually get to the station before the bus arrives. The secondary interval was a way to hold the priority phase until the bus checks out, something the internal features wouldn't do predictably, even if the bus was 2 seconds away. These intervals are calculated for each intersection based on the phasing and operations at each one. So 45 times we calculated this. And these colors, pay attention to the colors because they show up on the next slide. So what does this look like? Here's our intersection of 162nd and Division, one of our protected intersections. And the bus arrives and it wants to ask for priority. But because it's greater than 120 seconds away, the TSP remains inactive. As soon as the bus gets within 120 seconds away, the TSP checks in, and that's the beginning of my primary interval. So I set a PED recall at all the crossings in order to get people to these near site stations. The bus keeps moving through. I remove the PED recall because we're outside of the primary interval. And now I let the controller to sort of decide. So it's still trying to prioritize the signals. Then once we get within 30 seconds of the intersection, at this location, we enter the secondary interval. So now I'm starting to force off all the other phases in order to get to the bus interval. And this could happen at any point in the cycle. So it's this is why we add some aggressiveness to the TSP routine here. Now, I set it at 30 seconds because I know the longest time between the two bus intervals is about 40 seconds. So we'll capture the bus almost all the time. As the bus gets closer, we still don't want to serve the bus phase, but then when it gets within 15 seconds, it may still be serving that near side stop. That's all built into the machine learning model from Light. Then, as soon as we're within 15 seconds and we're within that bus interval, we can serve the bus. It gets the vertical bar, it drives through the intersection. And yes, I made a flashing triangle in PowerPoint. And then it checks out. And now this is the part where people got off the bus or they're trying to cross the street and maybe they've been delayed a long time because we've been prioritizing the bus. So now I want to get them across the street. So that's when I activate the PED priority interval. There was another situation that we ran into where two buses approaching the intersection from different directions caused some issues in the control. So let's say one bus comes in the westbound direction. It checks in first. The controller recognizes that bus check-in. A second bus comes eastbound and it checks in second. The controller essentially ignores that second call. But what happens if that bus gets to the intersection faster and needs service right away? What we developed was we basically check out the farther away bus, and now the closer bus becomes the active bus. Then the light system automatically checks in the further away bus, and now it's second in line. So the eastbound bus at a bus signal that it requires to cross the street gets its service because it showed up first. Meanwhile, the westbound bus is not prioritized. Now, I wanted to show this on the portal really quick. Do I have time? Okay, really quick. Here's the bus. Here's a view of the portal. Here's a bus heading eastbound towards 162nd. You can see it's calling for priority based on these blue dots with vertical white bars at 157th, 160th, and 162nd. As it gets closer, it's checked out at 157th. We still have calls at 160th and 162nd. Now the third signal away at 166th is receiving that request. So all along the corridor, we're running through these primary and secondary intervals as the bus moves through. The bus stops, and even though it's 5 blocks away from 162nd, we're receiving an ETA that we can act on. So we're moving through the cycle to get to that priority phase as quickly as we can, or actually as accurately as we can. Now the bus is moving again, and the ETA at 162nd is 30 seconds. That means that we are in that secondary interval, and it approaches the signal. The ETA is less than 15 seconds. It's hard to see. I mean, I didn't really capture it in this photo, but we have the eastbound bus phase up because the ETA is less than 7 seconds or less than 15 seconds. The bus gets through, it checks out that movement, the priority request is removed, and the signal goes back into its normal operation. So again, this is happening all along the corridor. You can see that happening through the portal. So you can see as the bus approaches, it goes into that secondary interval. As the bus is further away from a signal, it's activating the primary interval, getting people across the street to their stations. With that, I'll leave it open to questions. And thanks for bearing with me.
So, question, you know, with such complex phasing, how do you model it?
We don't. So I talked a lot about what we did and a little bit why we did it and how it works. I didn't really talk about how it performs yet. We're still working on that tool set to try to capture some quantitative data about this system. We can lean on Light because they have some great analytics, but we want to trust and verify. So we're still working on that.
So you know, so it's great that it's giving priority to bus and all that, and it's using and so the question is, how does it impact the rest of the general purpose lanes? Because now you don't have that bandwidth, especially if it's like a 10-minute separate or something.
Yeah, so the nice thing about the way that we've set it up is we're setting the controller free only for a brief period to get it out of its normal priority routine, but then it goes right back into coordination. So it is still running a coordinated system as long as the bus isn't there. And even when the bus is there, it's still trying to be in coordination.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
would like to welcome the next presenter. There's coffee and cookies that you guys should come up and have hydrants sneaking in and walking. I'm sure it's fun to sneak around and get cookies and coffee.
Okay, yeah. I need both of these. Oh.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Is this thing working? Hi, good afternoon. My name is Randy Parker. I'm with C-Tran. I'm the BRT Regional Planning and Project Manager here for C-Tran. With me today is Tom Shook from HDR, the consultant lead project manager from the consultant team, and Taylor Eit, who's our project planner manager at C-Tran as well. So we're here to talk about the Vine BRT system that we have up north in Vancouver. Let me figure this out. Here we go. Oh, wait. How do I make it go to the next slide? Next. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I clicked next. How did you do that? That one? Okay, thank you. So you know who we are. We're going to talk a little bit today about, the background and history behind our system and the 4 lines that we have either in operation, construction, or in the planning stage right now. And then we'll have some time at the end for question and answers. So a little bit about the history and background. We started in 2008 with a high capacity transit study conducted by regional RTC, Regional Transportation Council, which is the MPO on the other side of the river. It's equivalent to Metro on this side of the river in conjunction with C-Tran, the transit agency. That plan looked at 15 different corridors for high capacity transit in multiple modes. It concluded with what you see on the screen here for recommendation for 4 HCT corridors, and BRT was the selected mode. And those 4 corridors are the Fourth Plain Corridor, which is in operation now, it's complete. The Mill Plain Corridor, which is under construction right now. Highway 99 is in planning, and 205 we haven't got to yet. So a little bit about the Vine on Fourth Plain, which is our first BRT line. It began revenue service date in 2017. It was the first BRT system in the region. It comprises 6 miles between downtown Vancouver and the Vancouver Mall along Fourth Plain. Included 33 stations, a new transit center at the Vancouver Mall itself, and then an expansion of our existing maintenance facility. The features of it included articulated buses, transit signal priority, and then stations with off-board fare payment, real-time passenger information displays, security and cameras, safety enhancements, and station access upgrades. So that is implemented in the Fourth Plain corridor, and we're doing the same thing on all the other corridors. Some facts and figures pre-pandemic. We're at a 45% ridership increase before the pandemic. We had an 89% reduction in late departures, 12% reduction in scheduled travel time, and over $115 million of development within a quarter mile of the station. So it was doing really well. Pandemic hit, I think we're at about 90% of where we were now on that line before the pandemic. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom to talk about the Mill Plain line, which is currently in construction right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. Can you hear me? I think so. So as Randy mentioned, Mill Plain is under construction, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about how we got to construction on this corridor. As we noted earlier, this was part of the HCT plan for the Clark County region. It's C-Tran's second busiest travel corridor based on ridership. And clearly it was identified as a top priority because of the fact that it was second highest in ridership. The corridor was sort of unique relative to Fourth Plane in that C-Tran had made the conscious decision to prioritize the corridor, not only from the ridership itself, but also its competitiveness with federal funding. There's a program within the Federal Transit Administration, the Capital Investment Grant Program, actually what Division was funded as well with, that allows you to sort of warrant certain criteria for eligibility based on ridership. And so from the outset of this corridor, we were really deliberate about trying to streamline this as much as possible. It's kind of interesting from my perspective because a lot of agencies across the country that are going through BRT always consider their first one to be the most difficult because it's new to the region. A lot of people don't know what it is, so it's a little bit more difficult to sell it to the public. But also, I mean, that's true, but at the same time, when you go to your second and your third and your fourth, it can also be equally as challenging for a lot of different ways because you sort of set your standard and you want to improve on it. A lot of the public say, I want it better, I want it faster. And so Mill Plain was a sort of a victim of that, if you will, because we had learned or C-Tran had learned so much going through Fourth Plane that they wanted to make Mill Plain that much better, faster, deliver it faster, cheaper if we can. Actually, it was cheaper, at least at this point in time. And again, lessons learned were sort of applied throughout the process just because they had learned so much from their first corridor on Fourth Plane. Here's a overview map of the corridor itself, 10 miles long from downtown Vancouver east to East Vancouver. And you'll see the green is the existing Fourth Plane line. This is a little bit longer than Fourth Plane. Fourth Plane's what, 6 miles? This one's 10. And just for comparison purposes, like I mentioned before, cost was always a kind of a theme or a goal that we had throughout this process. 10 miles of corridor was, our goal was $50 million. That's all we were eligible for with Federal Transit Administration. Whereas Fourth Plane was $53 million in 2017 dollars. So you can imagine how complicated it was to fit 10 miles of corridor within $50 million. It was not easy, but we did it because we made deliberate, conscious decisions around making sure that it was need-based, making sure that the stations were accurately spaced, making sure that we were as cost-effective as we could possibly be to make sure that this is a functional project. And so with that, one of the things that we learned through Fourth Plane, applying it to Mill Plain, was station spacing. I mean, at Fourth Plane, they were about 1/3 of a mile apart. And a lot of the public said, we want it faster. How do you make the bus go faster? One way is to spread the stations a little bit. And so we did that. We made about 1/2 a mile on Mill Plain. And what not only does that have the operational benefit of reducing dwell time, it also reduces cost because every station is a pretty substantial cost for this project. We had one new transit center that it's under construction on the east side of the corridor. It's 9 bays. 2 of those are BRT style bays, near level boarding platforms, etc. One station modification on the west side. You'll see Turtle Place over here, if you can see. Yeah, downtown Vancouver. It's effectively, it was already built for the Fourth Plane project, and it was built for one bus. And we realized we were going to have 2 buses going in there at the same time, so we had to effectively modify it. And then with that was 10 miles of new fiber. Again, not easy. I think we were talking about Division before, but there was a lot of complications with the fiber on this corridor just because there was not much documentation in terms of what existed, where it was, what condition it was in. So we effectively had to put all brand new fiber along the corridor. There were about 4, I would say 3.5 transit priority treatments. One in particular was a downtown bat lane, about 4 or 5 blocks of bat lane that was really low cost, really effective because there was a pretty substantial choke point for bus activity getting into that Turtle Place station. And we said, why not do it? It's need-based, it's cost effective, basically striping and signage. And it's already in place actually as we speak. And then of course the buses, there's 8 new buses that are being built as we speak, or where Randy can talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, they're being assembled as we speak. And so they're going to be delivered here pretty soon. This project is, I guess I'll go to the next slide. We, as I mentioned before, there was a really deliberate decision to make this fast. Like I said, the public wanted it faster, more, cheaper, all those fun words that we always like to talk about. And so we started this in 2018 in the planning phase. It was about a year process, really focusing on the locally preferred alternative adoption, defining what the project was, entering in that funding program that I mentioned, doing some concept design, understanding what the initial cost estimating was, because like I said, $50 million was our absolute max and we could not go over that. So we had to be really careful and start early with the estimating and continue to sort of iterate. A lot of outreach, a lot of engagement from the beginning, from the outset. Quickly went into design and NEPA 2019, 2021. Advanced final design, got the funding agreement. Had the FTA administrator even show up for the groundbreaking, which is pretty exciting. And then go through right-of-way acquisition. Construction started in 21. It's under construction. It's about 50% complete. It's scheduled to open in November of 23. Randy's going to talk a little bit more about construction, but again, I think, as I mentioned before, the impressive thing about this project is that, like I said, is learning lessons, applying lessons, and C-Trans now under their 3rd one, applying even more lessons that we've learned through this process, particularly the federal funding process, which tends to be a little onerous, given just the requirements and kind of the hand-holding that you have to go through to get the money. So I'll turn it back over to Randy to talk about construction of Mill Plain.
Thank you. So one thing I just realized listening to Tom is he talks about this in the past tense because it's like the planning end of it's all done and he's done with it. He's moved on and to our next corridor. And actually I'm living it every day. And now we're in construction, which is that end of it's sort of new to me. And it's been a real challenge, particularly in in a pandemic time. So some of the challenges that we've wrestled with, labor shortages, it's been one day you show up and you got a whole new construction or concrete crew. And it's like, what happened? And well, they got moved to this job or they didn't show up. And so it's been really difficult in these times to keep the crews together. And one of the things that's helped with it is we've been nimble in the corridor. We intentionally did not want, one of the lessons we learned on this one was to not go in and turn the contractor loose and tear up 10 miles of corridor and have cones out for 2.5 years. So we intentionally phased the construction, but we had to be, because of the labor shortages and the issues with the crews, we had to be nimble. So like, if there's nothing they can do over there, go do something over here, right, with this crew. So we had to be nimble. The other thing was material shortages and long lead items. We were smart going in. We knew that like steel, for example, was very difficult to get. So we have 37 new stations that all have these shelters made out of steel. So we went out and bought all the steel at once and stored it someplace. So that was smart. But we ran into trouble with the fabrication of the steel into the actual shelters, and that the company that fabricates them can't keep enough employees to keep this thing running 24/7. So we've had an issue with that. We've since brought on another fab crew, and so we've caught up on that. And then FTA, when you meet with them, which you get to do quarterly because it's part of it's their money, they hear these same stories all over the nation, right? And so they come to you and ask you, how are you doing on long lead items? The other thing was vehicles. We knew, that would be an issue. So we got in line early and got those started as soon as we could. Of course, there's inflation. Every day costs you a little bit more. And then the other challenge we've had has been bicycle integration and wayfinding considerations. We have, in particular, one station that's near the
excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold, from near the Washington State School for the Blind. And so we worked with them quite a bit, not just on that station, but on all the stations throughout the corridor to implement wayfinding materials for them to, use the system. They're very dependent on the system and use it a lot. So that was really helpful for us on a number of fronts. I think that's it for me. Any questions on that before I'm going to turn it over to Taylor to talk about the next few corridors that we have in planning. Nope. Okay. Taylor, you're up.
Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. So I think one thing you heard from Tom and from Randy is how we're trying to work through some of these projects quickly. And when we talk about quickly, it's really starting to manifest now, where we're under construction with Mill Plain BRT, and we're actively planning for Highway 99 BRT, and really not just in a way to put a plan on the books, but to actively build out the corridor and lead into construction. Highway 99 BRT is our third highest ridership corridor on Highway 99 between the Vancouver waterfront and the Salmon Creek area of Clark County. For those of you that are familiar with the Vancouver area at all, the corridor on the southern end is at the Vancouver waterfront, which is just a really booming area with a lot of unique constraints and a real desire to make a pedestrian focused, high density neighborhood that will be a really unique challenge for us to navigate with these 60-foot BRT vehicles. But we're working collaboratively with the city to make sure that we're able to function in the way that we need to, but also that the waterfront is able to be a vibrant neighborhood that really meets the ideals that they wanted when they started planning there. As we move through the corridor up Main Street in the city of Vancouver, typically the Vine is a mixed traffic system with, as we've mentioned, a few hotspot priority treatments. We're actively working with the city of Vancouver right now, who's interested in looking at alternatives for Upper Main Street between 4th Plain and I-5, which is about towards the middle half of the corridor here. And they're looking at potentially repurposing lanes and creating different conditions in the corridor that might allow us to function in a way that currently we don't elsewhere in the system. So it's a really unique position for us to be in as we're looking at that stretch of the corridor. And as we move north of I-5, we move into Clark County. Highway 99 BRT is going to be C-Trans first multi-jurisdictional BRT project. So I'm sure many of you are aware, and obviously TriMet is aware, that that comes with its own unique set of constraints and opportunities and challenges as we work through different permitting systems and design review that we may not be familiar with, let alone getting to different priorities on the right of way with respect to signals and very much with respect to access to station design. As we continue moving north in the corridor, we get to 99th Street Transit Center. 99th Street Transit Center is one of our system hubs. We're largely a hub and spoke system, and at 99th Street Transit Center, most of the routes that C-Tran operates serving the north and west side of our service area begin or end here. This area and the transit center is on the west side of I-5. The Highway 99 corridor is primarily I-5 paralleling on Highway 99 on the east side. So as we're looking at this corridor, we're looking at opportunities that we may have to emphasize transfer capabilities either on the Highway 99 corridor or going to 99th Street Transit Center. We've found out that we may be looking at upwards of 10 minutes of additional travel time per trip just going into this transit center. We're moving through freeway interchanges as we get here. There are a lot of competing priorities at the signals through this area. There's not a lot of available space to try to push additional buses through, where we're looking at a high frequent service and also other C-Trans services that are navigating through this corridor. And as we move farther north into the Salmon Creek area, again, we're operating through a number of freeway access interchanges that are certainly giving us a look into various priorities and modal priorities working with different jurisdictional partners. As Randy mentioned with Highway 9, we have a lot of station access upgrades, and one of those is a new station design for us, which is a bike bypass station design. With that design, on streets with a bike lane, the bike lane comes up and over and behind our station platform so that we can eliminate that conflict when the bus is at stations. That happens in a few locations on the Mill Plain corridor. The Highway 99 corridor has a much greater length of bikeways along the corridor. It's a 10-mile corridor, and I want to say we have about 7 miles of that corridor that have bike lanes. So when we're looking at around 30 stations likely in this corridor, it's a significant change from the way that we've previously operated, and a really different environment at a lot of our platforms that, again, affects our wayfinding, affects how our riders and passengers experience the service on a daily basis. And as we're planning the Highway 99 corridor, we're also looking at filling out the 4th Plain corridor that Randy showed in the 2008 high capacity transit plan. We're looking at extending the 4th Plain BRT line to out East 4th Plain to 162nd Avenue and south on 162nd Avenue, connecting to Mill Plain Transit Center, which is currently under construction as part of the Mill Plain BRT project. So this corridor will link our 2 highest ridership corridors, our 2 first BRT projects, and offer us some new opportunities for how we are able to operate our high capacity services, particularly with respect to how we manage our vehicles, how we are able to interline them, provide less transfer opportunities for riders because we're able to take them through that corridor on a single seat, how we are able to manage our buses on the corridor through the use of active headway management and active dispatching. So our buses are moving through this corridor, and we do have TSP in the Highway 99 corridor today. We'll be extending that with the project as we build it out. The 4th Plain corridor outside of the original corridor does not have TSP, so that'll be a large component of that project, and we'll work with FAST as we build out that network of TSP through the 4th Plain extension. But on top of that, we're going to be exploring opportunities for us to be able to change the way that we manage our driver layovers and moving to a hot layover or a hot driver swap, which is going to be an interesting challenge for us to tackle that I think could have some great operational efficiencies for us. But on top of new corridors and potentially different operational styles, we're also likely looking at our first implementation of alternative fuel buses on these corridors. I believe it was Tuesday that C-Tran adopted our alternative fueling vehicle study, which is directing us to begin pursuing battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So there's a good chance that as we're building out these corridors, we'll need to be looking at different types of fueling infrastructure, either on corridor or at our maintenance facility. But either way, it'll have a significant difference on how we operate the corridor that we'll certainly need to be figuring out in quick time. Tom showed an earlier slide that had about a 5-year timeline horizon between planning, design, and construction for Mill Plain BRT. You might notice on this slide between planning, design, and construction for both Highway 99 BRT and the 4th Plain BRT extension, we're looking about for 4.5 years. So this is going to be a very expedited process for us. And one of the ways that we're able to go about that is because we're going to be looking at a number of different funding opportunities for these two projects that are different from our original Fourth Plane and Mo Plane projects, which were largely based in that CIG federal funding program. These projects will likely use a number of different grant sources, some of which may be federal, but it will also be largely locally and state funded. And all of that will allow us to move a little bit quicker through these projects so that we're able to continue to progress towards construction. We'll also be working, as I mentioned, with both Clark County and the City of Vancouver in both of these corridors, both of which we are likely to have stations, if not be in right of way for each of those jurisdictions, not to mention WashDOT with a number of intersections that are impacted by either I-5, I-205, or various through service area. And beyond that, we'll be looking at different ways that we might be able to deliver these projects once we get towards the construction phase. And that'll be a new and unique experience for us, all with a targeted opening date of 2026 to 2027. So with that, happy to take any questions on those projects or any of them. Yeah.
Any consideration of the demographic income level of residents' lives?
How so?
Like demographics or like the income level of the residents or the people that visit us, who host businesses?
Sure, yeah. That was a main consideration, I would say, of the original high capacity transit plan as it was put in place by RTC. And as we're going through the corridors and conducting planning processes today, that's a really critical driving factor of where we are siting stations, where we are running our alignment, how we're making connections, and really now feeding into even the fuel source of the vehicles.
So what percentage increase in ridership do you expect once the PRK complex takes place?
Well, New Plane's not done.
Or
Did he
what
say?
I expect?
Oh, that's really hard to say with the pandemic.
That it's a really interesting question, particularly in our system where we have a lot of varying levels of service quality that exists today. The Highway 99 corridor is a combination of two routes, essentially, one of which is a frequent service route. Another operates 30 minutes peak and 60 minutes off peak. The Fourth Plane extension project will combine two routes that do not have a service connection that exists today. So we're really trying to look beyond the service that's currently available into building a cohesive network that will create a high quality rider experience and generate long-term results. So all that to say, there are so many unknowns with these projects that we know based off of our experience with the Fourth Lane BRT project and the ridership growth that we saw there, as well as with a lot of the treatments that we're planning to put in place, that we expect really significant ridership growth in these corridors, particularly based on a lot of the land use that we'll be running through some of our station locations. But exact projections, especially as of late, as we're moving through corridor planning in a pandemic-filled world, has been, I would say, challenging to say the least.
I will say, I would just add also that, you know, I don't have a percentage for you, but like we've increased service on the current line in 99 corridor, Route 71, and it goes down to the waterfront, and it's already substantially increased now. So, I mean, I'm expecting good things, but I think we're still coming out of the pandemic, to be honest.
So I have a question about NEPA environmental permit. Recently, WashDOT has increased the NEPA process for some applications. Has that affected this project scale?
Go ahead.
So for Mill Plain, we didn't have that. I think you're referring to yeah, yeah, for like new roadway, rubber tire. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't something that we had to worry about for Mill Plain, and we just finished the NEPA process, what, 2 years ago or something, and this is new. It's something we're actively looking into right now for Highway 99 because it will have to go through the NEPA process. One thing we did determine is that it only applies to new roadway surface. So when you're adding a station, for example, like a bus pad and a station within the extent of an existing roadway, it doesn't necessarily apply. But there are a couple of spots on Highway 99 that we are looking at new roadway, whether it be a access road to the college on the north side, or maybe some kind, just different things we're looking at. So we're very mindful of that. But what I am hearing that it could add a year of environmental review, not the development of the documentation, but more the review process, because the state of Washington, it's so new to them that they really don't know how to, quite honestly, they're not ready for it. They don't know how to actually put it in action yet. So it's sort of like once they figure it out, it'll probably be a little bit more streamlined. So we're kind of in that phase right now. Go ahead. I don't know. I can't remember. Sorry.
You got all the planners.
Yeah, you got all the planners. No. And it's the data, same data that TriMet uses. It's the data collection, but I know the technology, it's GPS. It's not the same one that Division has. I'm gonna botch this. It's probably GTT, I think. Does that make sense? Does that sound right? Okay. Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Are there any other questions for the other presenters that we didn't have time for? Is there anybody, any other? Before we leave, make sure your parking ticket got validated, so you don't have to pay for parking. There's still coffee and cookies. We really got more cookies than I guess we needed. And I wanted to say thank you again for coming out. Speakers and presenters, please see me for speaker gifts. If you haven't emailed me about it, please see me. We have t-shirts of all sizes, and then also the option for donating to charity. So thank you.
Yeah.